Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was Son of Greek Gods and Became Hawaiian Demigod Part 1. Before we start, please go support Franklin Jr. LeBron for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. This story is about a Hawaiian demigod Naruto. But this takes place in Percy, where Naruto will be Hera and Amphitrite's champion to do both women a favor. Naruto x Harem. Chapter 1. Two women could be seen in a divine palace talking about a very serious topic for one of the two ladies who lived in the room, while calmly drinking tea. The two women were the goddesses Hera, goddess of marriage, protector of childbirth, and queen of the Olympian pantheon. Daughter of the Titan Cronus and the Titan Rhea, sister of the 6 first-generation Olympian gods, and wife of Zeus, king of Olympus. Hera had wavy crimson hair and wore a green dress with a V-neck line and a lighter color at the hem. The dress was very long, covering her feet completely. The other was Amphitrite, goddess of the sea and calm winds, daughter of Ocean and Tethys and queen of the oceans, wife of Poseidon, king of the sea. Amphitrite had blonde hair with white tips, while the lower part of her body was that of a blue fish. Being this a triton or mermaid, on her head she had a crown that perfectly matched her hair. Both women were talking about a very serious topic for the red-headed queen of Olympus. Well, her husband and younger brother Zeus. He was planning to marry Hebe, the goddess of youth, and his daughter to a demigod named Hercules, or Heracles, who was also Zeus's son, but to a human from the mortal realm. Because, apparently the boy had completed the 12 labors to become a complete god, and Zeus, being the good privileged father that he is, decided to give his most beautiful daughter to the son who made him most proud. Nothing new coming from the god who tricked his sister into marrying him. And wanting to prevent his daughter, who was the most innocent compared to the other gods, from marrying a brute like Heracles, he turned to his most trusted friend, whom he could talk to about the matter, since telling anyone else what he was planning to prevent from marrying would be very risky. Well, many gods, even her brothers, preferred to tell Zeus and not have him punish them than to keep that secret for her. Sigh. And that's all, Amphitrite. I don't know what to do. It's only a few months until Hercules is crowned god of justice by Zeus and marries Hebe. She said, very worried. Besides, she hated Hercules for being living proof that her husband didn't give a damn about cheating on her, and especially telling the whole pantheon without caring about her or what she thinks. He is also worried about his daughter. Amphitrite looked at her stressed friend. She had truly resorted to anything to prevent the marriage of her only daughter, who might still be innocent in the eyes of most gods. According to what her friend told her, she even put it up for a vote at the meeting of the 12 Olympians, but there was a tie of 6 each. He ended up losing since both of the big 3 agreed, while the last of the big 3, who was Hades, god of the underworld and the dead, didn't even go. Amphitrite, well, I can give you a hand. Hera looked up with hope. Really? She asked, surprised. Amphitrite, yes. The best way to end this is to find a way to break up the marriage, not avoid it. Though his joy subsided. Zeus has already made it clear that the only way for Hercules and Hebe to marry is for Hercules to lose to someone who wants Hebe's hand. She said, upset about her husband. The bastard really knew what he was doing when he wanted to. No god besides the big 3, Apollo, and a few others could match Hercules in terms of raw power. Since Hercules, upon completing the 12 labors, was crowned a god and was granted the strength of Zeus, and with that strength capable of lifting all of Olympus, no one could defeat him. Furthermore, Demeter, wanting to support her, placed the condition that even champions of the gods could challenge Hercules. But since no champion from Camp Half-Blood could possibly match Hercules, technically that condition was useless. Amphitrite then convinced someone to beat the Hercules kid. I might even recommend an old acquaintance. Hera raised an eyebrow in doubt at her friend's statement. Someone who could beat Hercules? No god of that stature would be interested in this or good enough to marry Hebe. He said that because he'd already gone through all the options. And besides those who couldn't, all those who could were perverts and unfaithful, just as bad as Hercules, or worse. Making them not a good option. Amphitrite, he's not a god, well, not quite. He's a very ancient demigod, though he's already considered a god due to his legend and exploits, even though he was given immortality. Technically, he's still a demigod and could be your champion in this matter, at least temporarily," she said, sipping tea calmly. "Although we should give him something in return. He doesn't like working for free, especially when he ends up attracting attention," she said, remembering that about her acquaintance. "Amphitrite, although knowing why she is helping Hebe could help us more, something she doesn't like is these arranged marriages." Hera looked at her friend with doubt. "I trusted her, but this option wasn't very reliable." "A demigod? Well, even if he's considered a god, can he still take on Hercules? Is he too strong? For any demigod, let alone one I don't know, he could easily be the equal of Hercules and Apollo." Amphitrite nodded, understanding her friend and sister-in-law's concerns. "I understand, but don't worry. Besides the fact that his power is beyond your comprehension, he's a person who dislikes injustice." Hera did not trust much in what her brother's wife said. "I didn't know of any demigod in the Greek pantheon who could equal or surpass Hercules, and the only demigod other than Hercules to become a god is Dionysus, and he doesn't hold a candle to her husband's favorite son." "All right. Let's see that demigod, maybe he'll be just what you say," she said, sighing at being her last option. Besides, it would only take about 20 minutes. What else could happen besides not being someone really strong? Elsewhere, two brown-skinned women could be seen on an island seemingly isolated from the world. Or so one could say, since there seemed to be no one else besides them for miles, or even thousands of miles. Both girls were sitting on the edge of the beach, with the water hitting their skin, which was caressed by the sand. One of these girls, named Moana, had what appeared to be tattoos or runes on her left shoulder. She also wore a skirt and a top of the same Hawaiian design. On her wrist she had what appeared to be palm tree forearms, along with a similar palm tree shoulder pad, and further up her forearm, a golden belt. Next to her, the other girl named Nani was wearing a simple blue swimsuit with white stripes that perfectly fit her beautiful Hawaiian figure. These two girls, who seemed to be the only life thousands of miles away, were sunbathing very calmly and peacefully in the fresh, natural air of the island. Meanwhile, as if on cue, the water parted slightly away from the two women, allowing Hera and Amphitrite to emerge from the ocean in their mortal forms, two beauties. "This is it," Amphitrite said as her wardrobe changed into one more suitable for the beach she was on. She changed into a yellow robe that flapped in the wind, more suited to her teenage body, which the goddess had taken on, but left her hair blonde. Hera, who was surprised by the place, looked at her friend and changed her mind. "We're not in the domain of Amphitrite, Greece. There shouldn't be any Greek demigods here. And why did you take the appearance of a teenage girl?" the woman said as she magically made her dress shorter so that it wouldn't drag in the sand and get unnecessarily dirty. Amphitrite looked at her friend as a tropical drink with a pineapple slice on the rim appeared in her palm. "I never said I was a Greek demigod. And this appearance is more fitting, more free-spirited too," he said, smiling as he approached the girls who seemed to be having a chat among themselves. Until both girls noticed the presence of both goddesses before them. "Lady Amphitrite, welcome," Nani said, standing up to greet the woman with a bow. Meanwhile, Moana, at her side, simply greeted her without any respect, which didn't seem to bother Amphitrite. "Amphitrite. Hello, Nani Moana," the Sea Queen said calmly. "And where's Naruto? I'm sure I sensed him here before I came," the goddess said doubtfully, looking anywhere visible to find the person she was looking for. Moana, well, she ran off over there a few minutes ago, talking about the highest place, the biggest fall, and all that stuff, said the dark-skinned girl without interest. Nani giggled because Moana never showed respect to anyone, regardless of whether they were a god, a demigod, or a mortal. Amphitrite also laughed at her friend's antics. "Yeah, he's an idiot. Maybe he was going to achieve a new height somewhere in the mountains," she said amusedly while Hera looked at her in surprise. "I didn't know that Amphitrite, the queen of the sea and one of the most classy women in the oceans, was capable of being so open with others." But in those few minutes here, she discovered things that even as her best friend, she hadn't known before the goddess. The ability to laugh without holding her lips, to swear openly, and not having to be polite or maintain a posture in front of others. Hera, if he's not here, we should come back later, she said calmly. Moana looked at her doubtfully. But then she put it aside to continue attending to anything else that occurred to her or seemed interesting. You can stay until I get back, if you're really climbing the mountain peak. It should only take a few minutes round trip. Hearing this, Hera looked at the island's mountain and was slightly surprised. Is that abysmal mountain the one their potential champion wanted to climb? That thing could be as high as the Olympic realm, or even higher. It was impossible for the boy to climb it in a few minutes with sheer physical effort. Hera, no need, we'll come back later, responded to what the girl had said. Or so she hoped, as a voice interrupted her, drawing everyone's attention to the sky where a shadow covered by the sun was falling at high speed. Cannonball! A voice shouted as it hit the ground, causing a giant wave of water to crash over the women. But Amphitrite simply struck the trident that appeared in her hand, causing her and Hera to be swept away by the water. At that moment, the wave calmed down, and Moana and Nani, who were soaked, looked at the figure emerging from the sea. That was another wave! The figure slowly emerged, revealing his body, screamed like a child. The dark-skinned boy had many symbols and runes across his chest, arms, and back, which fit well with the necklace around his neck. His hair was black and very thick, matching perfectly with the wild, black eyes of the boy in board shorts. This was Naruto, demigod of Hawaii, who ruled the entire island. The boy emerged from the water with a slow walk, shaking his water-soaked hair. That was great, we should do it again, buddy, he said as a tentacle of water emerged from the beach and high-fived the boy. Hera looked at this in surprise. Are you a water or sea god? She asked, looking at Naruto, who made a towel appear in his hand and used it to wrap it around her neck. Naruto, god of the sea? No, I'm not even a god. Beyond what others think, I'm a semi-mortal, he said, grinning savagely, showing his fangs to the goddess of marriage. Hera nodded at the boy's response, looking very surprised. Besides being super cute, he also seemed fun and friendly. Maybe that's why Amphitrite was so different here. The boy made her that way by nature. So, Amphitrite, do I have to wait for a reason for your visit, or was it just a coincidence? He asked, drying his face and placing his towel around his neck to look doubtfully at the goddess of the sea and oceans. Amphitrite, it's a favor, though not from me. From my friend here, she said, pointing at Hera, and Naruto looked at her doubtfully. Naruto approached Hera and brought his face close to hers, then circled around the woman and looked at her closely, making Hera feel a certain way afterward because of the demigod's analyzing eyes. Are you Hera? The goddess of marriage, fidelity, women, and virginity? Hera nodded in surprise because the boy discovered all this by looking at her, especially since no human story told what she was like in her mortal form other than that she was an extraordinary beauty. Hera, yes, I am Hera, goddess queen of Olympus, and the favor I've come to ask is very important. Naruto nodded. A favor? Sure, depending on what it is, you'll have to give me something in return, he said, and the woman nodded. But before he could speak, Naruto yawned loudly, surprising the divine redhead. Let's talk inside, it's very tiring here, he said, walking toward the cabin in the distance. Hera looked at Amphitrite doubtfully, and the latter just smiled. That's just the way he is, a little free in his way of acting and speaking, the goddess said, amused by the boy and his personality, while Hera still seemed a little out of place with everything that was happening. This way of treating her was very different from the rest of Olympus, where if she wasn't treated with respect, it was with fear, and they were always courteous but distant with her. She could barely speak to her sisters and the occasional goddess, like her daughter Hebe. Even her nymphs were distant from her, even though they had to serve her and look after her in her palace. Move your legs, Hera, you'll be left behind. Hera snapped out of her mind to follow her friend who was ahead along with Moana and Nani who were closely following the dark-skinned demigod who had his hands on his head unconcerned. Upon arriving at the house, Hera sat on a chair while Naruto sat on the couch, and Moana did the same next to him. Amphitrite sat on the back of the couch, still sipping her tropical juice, while Nani went to the kitchen. Naruto, Now then, what did you want to talk about? He asked calmly as he made the towel disappear from his hands and settled himself on the sofa next to Moana. Hera, in a calm tone, began to talk about the topic at hand. I want you to defeat my husband's son so he won't marry my daughter, she said calmly. Hera waited patiently for an answer while closing her eyes in meditation. No answer came, causing the goddess to open her eyes and meet the confused gaze of Naruto and Moana, who seemed to have misunderstood her words. Naruto, let me see. You want me to? Hera, yes. Naruto, I defeated your husband's son so he could marry your daughter, didn't I? I asked and Hera nodded again. Well, as you explained it, I can assume that your husband's son is not your son or you don't consider him as such, but still. If your daughter is your husband's daughter, and it seems that she is, does that make your husband want to marry brothers? Hera was embarrassed because this was so normal in the Greek pantheon that she didn't even mince her words when saying it to a human from another pantheon who had possibly never experienced the same thing. Amphitrite, that's very normal in Olympus. Just saying that if her husband is her little brother is fine, Amphitrite said amused, making Hera blush even bigger. But Naruto looked surprised at what she discovered. Naruto, if it's so normal for relatives to marry in Olympus, then why do you want me to defeat you stepchildren? Hera frowned at Naruto's use of Hercules, which angered her a little. But she calmed down since the boy knows nothing about her pantheon, possibly because she and her husband are happy together. Hera, my husband's son isn't worthy of my daughter. He's very rude, unfaithful, and a womanizer, she said, this time without using sophisticated words to express what she thought of her godson. Naruto, that doesn't sound like a nice person, but I won't be able to help you. Hera frowned in annoyance. Then why come here if you couldn't help from the start? She asked, annoyed that she'd wasted more time than she'd intended. Right now, she should be asking for help from a god who can handle Hercules, but won't do anything bad to her daughter. Naruto saw the woman's anger and spoke. You misunderstand me. I won't be able to help you since the marriage isn't with you. Unless your daughter is the one who asks for help, I won't get involved in this, he said, because he couldn't interfere simply because the mother didn't think the man who picked up her daughter was the right fit. Amphitrite, knowing that Hera didn't tell Naruto that the girl was being given as a trophy for achieving the achievement of becoming a god, approached the black-haired boy's ear, who nodded at Hera's attentive gaze. Naruto sighed after listening to Amphitrite and looked at Hera. Okay, I'll help you. But of course you owe me a favor. I'm not free, he said with a smile. Hera nodded calmly at his condition, and the boy stood up. Fine. What should I do? He asked, extending his hand for the woman to agree, and she gently took it. Chapter 2. Naruto, I refuse. The demigod shouted from the top of a palm tree while below Nani, Amphitrite and Moana tried to get him to come down. And why was the demigod like that, you might ask? Well, the reason was that the favor Hera had to ask of the Hawaiian was a favor that had the only unspoken condition of the boy. Leave the island. Because it was something the boy never did for somewhat stupid reasons, but honestly he was right about those stupid reasons. Amphitrite, it'll only be for 2 months at most. It's not that big a deal, said the goddess, rolling her eyes at her friend. The wild-eyed boy always got like that when it came to leaving this island. The last time I left my old island, some researchers found it, and called it the 8th island of Hawaii. I shouted angrily. Moana sweated a drop at her friend's whining, while Nani only had her uncomfortable smile at the embarrassing situation in which the demigod placed them in front of what she now knew as Hera, the goddess of women and marriage. Moana, you're throwing a tantrum about losing an island, but I don't know that it'll happen again. Naruto frowned angrily. That's exactly why. It's been 5 times already, and every time researchers find it and name it the Hawaiian Islands because it's so close, he said, even more angrily and upset, while crossing his arms over the matter. I only leave it for 1 day, and when I come back, it's full of people building houses. Amphitrite, you're leaving for a century, so they'll definitely find her. We're asking you a favor that will take you 2 or 3 months at most. Naruto, I already said no, Amphitrite, I won't leave my island. I don't care what they give me in return. he said as he turned his gaze. Moana frowned at the demigod's tantrum. Naruto, either you get down or I'll put you down, she yelled at the boy. In response, he just stuck his tongue out at her while continuing to look away, completely ignoring her. Fine. I'll put you down, she said, moving her hands in the air like calm waves. Meanwhile, with a blue glow, the runes on her shoulders lit up, and the water behind the girl moved. The water on the beach slowly began to pile up as Naruto continued to ignore it. Until a tentacle tried to grab his ankle, but it was about to hit him, but the water easily dodged it. Naruto, don't pay attention to Moana. I know you won't betray me and you'll agree with me, right? I asked, looking directly at the tentacle, but then I frowned. So we don't have that one, I said, and the tentacle seemed confused. Naruto bridled as he stared at the water. Don't pretend. I can see the urge to betray me in your sweaty face. You're just waiting for me to let my guard down to help Moana. The tentacle shook its head. You'd never do it? The tentacle nodded. I still don't trust it. I'll move away, I'll think about it, it said, waving the water away with its hand. She stood still while Naruto seemed to think of something and the water asked to say what. I don't think you'd come up with a plan to get me down, she said, looking at the water. The water simply nodded and Naruto went back to thinking again, all without taking into account Moana, who was rising on another water tentacle from below with an evil smile. Until he felt a touch on his shoulder, and when he opened his eyes he saw nothing. Confused, Naruto looked at where he'd been touched, very confused. Until he felt another touch on his other shoulder, and when he turned around, he saw nothing again. Angry, Naruto felt a tap on his previous shoulder again, and when he looked back, he was empty. Are you really doing this? He thought as he smiled. He felt another tap on his shoulder, but instead of turning to that side, he looked to the other where he almost caught a Moana riding a water tentacle. Naruto, you're a traitor, he said, but only felt water falling on his face, leaving him blank. The demigod wiped the water from his face to look at Moana with a superior smile. You won't bring me down from here, no matter what. I won't leave my island, not for you, nor for the favor of that goddess. Moana shook her head, tired of the same subject and the way her friend behaved in the face of these doubts. You must help that girl. Imagine if Nanny were forced to marry a man like that Hercules, or whatever his name is. Naruto, yes, but my island. They'll take it from me, and I'll have nowhere to live after that, he said while hugging the palm tree's leaves. It's the only island with a good size to survive, the others aren't that big. Moana, don't buck with me, Naruto, she said, annoyed. You've been living on this island for over 2 centuries, and you've only exploited 25% of the island's surface. And that's equivalent to 8% of the entire island, not counting underwater caves. You even have enough room to create a gigantic city, and you'll have the same size as the island free. Naruto, that doesn't change the fact that it's my island and I won't give it to those humans. I already gave them the other islands and they even have Las Vegas, so that should be more than enough for them. Moana, if you don't come down I'll force you and it won't be nice. Naruto stuck his tongue out at her again. In response, Moana sent 2 water tentacles hurtling toward the raven-haired man. Naruto quickly jumped to another palm tree and dodged the second one by grabbing it with his hand. Naruto, you are a traitor, she said to the tentacle, but what she received was another spit of water in her face, soaking her hair and face again. He hated you, she said, swatting away the water. With that, he began to dry his face while dodging more water tentacles from Moana, who moved her hands again. This time, however, with a firmer motion, and with that, large columns of rocks headed toward Naruto, who dodged them just the same. Shaking her hair one last time, Naruto smiled at the girl in a challenging and amused manner. Moana did the same, returning to the attack with multiple rock pillars and water tentacles aimed at the demigod. But this one, as if it were something normal, dodged and destroyed them using only his feet, which brought a smile of superiority to Moana's gaze. Lowering her hand quickly and abruptly, Moana caused a lightning bolt to fall towards Naruto, who looked at it heading towards him. But as if it were a game, he took the lightning bolt in his hand and threw it towards Moana, severing the tentacle by which she was holding up. Falling, the girl was caught by the water cushioning her fall from such a height. Snorting in annoyance at having lost the battle, Moana crossed her arms. "It was luck," she said, gathering her hair, wet from the water as it fell. Naruto smiled at seeing that he was victorious in this battle against his friend, but he was still hit by the water tentacle from behind, which sent him to the ground, leaving his face buried in sand. "Naruto, one day I'll finish you off," he said, poking his head out of the impressively clean sand. "Fine, I've given up. I'll do as I'm told," he said angrily, crossing his arms. Amphitrite and Moana smiled at achieving their goal. While Hera smiled similarly in the distance, the boy seemed very strong to her, so he must be someone capable of facing Hercules. Besides, he was a good person and could be good for Hebe, because if the two didn't work out as a relationship, they could simply get a divorce, and she could tell the dark-skinned boy wouldn't have a problem accepting a divorce, unlike others like her husband's sons. Naruto approached Hera and looked at her. "If I lose my island, I will destroy the mountain that holds Olympus up," he said, but was suddenly pulled aside by Amphitrite, who was sweating profusely over something Hera didn't know but was curious to know. "Good, everything's ready. You leave early tomorrow for Camp Half-Blood. I'll send you the location later with a fish," she said to enter the sea while Hera, who didn't seem to resist, was carried away. Naruto looked at this, puzzled by the woman's attitude, but a sudden wind and a storm told him everything. "Naruto! What god from another pantheon has been here?" a loud voice asked, accompanied by thunder and lightning, while storm clouds formed the face of an enraged woman. Naruto looked at this cloud approaching him. "Mom, I already told you that the goddess Amphitrite would visit me sometimes. You shouldn't act like this every time something divine comes within a kilometer of me," he told his now revealed mother. The demigod's mother frowned at her son, or so it seemed. "I didn't sense that sea goddess. It was another divine presence, and she shouldn't be here. Not even the sea goddess should be here. This is Hawaiian land. Gods of other pantheons are strictly forbidden here." Naruto frowned at the rule he hated so much. "What do you want me to do? I also have the right to make more friends," he said, angrily looking at his mother defiantly. "I never said you can't make friends, just that they aren't enemy gods." "Naruto, they're not enemy gods, you just don't like me interacting with other people," he said, staring at his mother. The goddess stared at her son, straight in his defiant eyes. "That's not true, and you know it. I gave you a water spirit to always be with you. Besides, if you were to leave this island covered by the evils of the ocean, perhaps you would have more friends," the goddess said, looking at her son, who simply shrank, not wanting to accept what his mother had said. "Naruto, messing with mortals will only make things worse. They live for one day, Mom, one day," he said, but Moana whispered something in his ear that made him blush in embarrassment for the correction of 1 year and 1 century. "Naruto, that doesn't matter, the point is, if I interact with them, it'll be like befriending a cloud. They'll vanish the next day. Or 100 years later, it makes no difference." He said it because he knew Moana would correct him as always. "All I want is more friends who I'll have to look at as older and older until they become elderly, or I'll have to stop talking to because I don't age and they'd realize my origins. I just want more friends who are more divine like me," he said, looking at his mother, who still maintained her cold and serious expression. What his son was saying was very dangerous, especially considering he was a half-god. "If you want divine friends, you can start associating with our pantheon." Naruto quickly shook his head. "No way! Not to mention that most people hate me for being the first cleansing of our pantheon. Those who don't hate me try to avoid me. I only just became friends with the ocean on my own merit, and it took me a full millennium," she said, pointing at the water tentacle that greeted the supreme goddess in the form of a storm, who looked at her with a raised eyebrow, causing the water to become frightened. "There's still more to relate to. The water spirits and the forest spirits. Both groups could be your friends." "Naruto, I tried to befriend the forest people and they shot me out with arrows, and it was similar with the water people. They threw tridents at me until I managed to get out of the ocean, and 2 of them hit me," he said, showing a scar on his arm. The mother leaned closer to get a better look at the small wound, but all she saw were tiny scratch marks. That's a cat scratch. Naruto hit his arm to continue speaking. That's beside the point. The problem is that almost everyone in our pantheon hates my guts, and those who don't simply ignore me. I only just became friends with Nani because she was shy, he said, pointing at the girl who greeted him at the sight of his goddess. You're still shy, his mother said to Naruto. It doesn't matter, Mom. The point is that in our pantheon, besides you, Nani, and the living volcano over there, you're the only ones who even speak to me. There isn't even another demigod for me to keep company, and if there were, I'd die just like any other human. Not like me, because someone made me immortal. The storm sighed at having to deal so much with her son and his insistence. Naruto, I already told you that you were born immortal. I didn't make you one so I wouldn't lose you. Naruto, that's clearly false. There is no other demigod in history who was born immortal. In Norse, Greek, and Shinto, demigods are mortals with divine magic. I am the only immortal demigod, and that shouldn't be possible. Maybe you're just a special demigod. You've always been special, and you know it, she said calmly, as the clouds seemed to return to white, and the thunder and lightning below echoed inside the spectral goddess. Naruto grumbled because when his mother calmed down it meant that she either lost the argument, or won it, and since he had never won an argument he could say that this was not the first time. I'll let you interact with the other pantheons. Naruto, it's always the same, because once you didn't let me do something like the adult I was. You said yes? He asked, looking at his mother in surprise. The goddess gave her son a small smile, even though she disagreed. I'll let you associate with the other gods as you wish, at least freely. Naruto looked at his mother happily, because after eons of years his mother had finally allowed him to speak with other gods without restrictions. Moana spoke with a doubt. Does that mean you won't be as protective of him as before? She asked, earning Nani's gaze. Don't say that, you're crazy. She's the supreme goddess, how can you call her that? She said, frightened, while pulling on Moana's ear, who complained of pain. Moana, but it's true. I'm only 3 years old here and she always forbids him from talking to anything divine besides you and water, she said, scaring Nani even more, who was worried about Naruto's mother's reaction. Naruto's mother looked at this with a serious face, but instead of punishing him, the girl simply sighed, calming down. Yes, I'll stop being so overprotective of him, she said, eliciting a Moana-like smile and a surprised look on Nani's face for never having imagined the goddess would accept that request, and at the same time, she insulted him. To her, that was just a normal protection of a mother, not overprotection. Naruto smiled as he happily hugged the clouds his mother created. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, he said happily as the goddess nodded. Her son's hug brought a smile to the woman's face, but she put that aside to finish her words. I accept, but if anything happens to you at the hands of those gods, everyone will die. No matter who is guilty of the act. Thunder crashed all around as she called out, and the woman became a storm again. But now she could truly call herself a storm, as even tornadoes rose up with her voice, the water churned with her words, and lightning crackled with her anger and rage, making Moana believe the sky would fall on them, slightly scaring the girl. Naruto sweated a drop at the global threat his mother posed. If gods like Indra of the Hindus or Zeus of the Olympians heard this, they would go mad simply from being offended and begin a useless battle against the gods most connected to their concepts and living representations of them, being one of the smallest yet most powerful pantheons. Naruto reassured his mother with a smile. Don't worry, mother. If anyone tries anything, I'll throw an island, the moon, or the sun at them, he said, smiling while showing his muscular arm to make it clear that he wouldn't let anyone down and that he would be fine. Which gave her mother the confidence she needed, and she smiled. Good. I have to go. There are things to do, she said, beginning to fade away. If you're going to leave the island for the territory of other cemeteries, at least let me know so I'm aware, he said, disappearing into thin air, the clouds and weather returning to their former, normal state. Nani, when you mentioned throwing islands, moons, and suns, you were just playing, right? Moana asked in a whisper as the brown-skinned boy headed off toward the cabin, perhaps to prepare his backpack for tomorrow, which would be the first day he could go out to another cemetery with his mother's full permission and therefore free will without having to hide. Nanny, he was the first person to carry Naruto, and he's been with him since he was 13 years old. I can tell by his exploits that you weren't playing, she said, smiling, remembering what the black-haired rat-like boy, that's what they call him in my country, used to do for fun. Moana was amazed. He can really do that? She wondered, seeing the boy already inside the cabin. She put that aside to follow the path with Nanny to see what Naruto was doing, and if they had to help or do something. Chapter 3. Hera and Amphitrite could be seen arriving at Atlanta's main palace. They went directly to the room they were using before heading to the demigod Naruto's island to ask Hera for a small favor. Both women, in their divine forms, sat back down while Hera stared at Amphitrite in doubt. She sipped her tea calmly, much to her friend's disbelief. "What was that sudden change over there?" she asked, not looking at her friend, as she swirled her tea slightly. The goddess of the peaceful seas and oceans looked at her friend, her face as calm as before. "It wasn't a change, I was just a little more free, so to speak," she said, sipping her tea again. "Hera freer?" "Amphitrite, you should know that being queen isn't very pleasant. Having to measure words, postures, and tone isn't really my cup of tea. That's why when I'm with Naruto, I can be more free. He's a great friend and makes you feel confident in an instant," she said, and Hera looked at her friend. "Don't tell me you like him?" she asked, surprised. Amphitrite is the last goddess on Olympus I expected to be unfaithful to her husband, since the others almost always have children with mortals. "Not like you think," she said, a little embarrassed and blushing. "I only see him as a friend, since I've known him for thousands of years." Hera, okay. But this could easily cause misunderstandings between you and the demigod. "And does Poseidon even know you know him or something?" I asked with interest. I didn't think Amphitrite would actually dislike the boy, but I knew she was faithful and wouldn't go around with the boy just to have a husband, but still. His brother never mentioned meeting the boy. But he also never mentioned that Poseidon spoke of anything beyond his conquests, especially with his new son just entering the camp. His brother apparently only hoped for something grandiose, to proclaim the boy as his son. Because although he hasn't confirmed it yet, the boy was clearly his son, given his mastery of water. Amphitrite, no. I don't think he even knows I go out from time to time, you know. I'm gone for days looking for a new conquest, she said, a little angrily, saying that part. Hera, this is probably very bad. The goddess thought, stressed, knowing that Poseidon, upon finding out, would create a scandal and want Naruto dead, which won't be possible since he's his future champion. But seeing as Zeus won't like him being his champion, he'll possibly support Poseidon in killing Naruto or doing something against him. Amphitrite, don't worry so much. I know Poseidon, he'll calm down after a few minutes of complaining, she said, although she didn't really believe her husband would get cold feet. But she would have to. Sooner or later he'd stop throwing a tantrum, since he wouldn't be able to do anything else. Hera, if you say so, she said, putting down her teacup and standing up. I have to get back. Zeus is extremely paranoid when I'm out for too long. But don't forget to tell your friend the location of the camp. She left, leaving the goddess calm in her seat. Amphitrite, yes, my friend. She thought that last thing, noticing the note with which the Queen of Olympus insinuated that part. The next day, Naruto, Moana, and Nanny could be seen standing in front of the house where they were waiting for whoever or whatever goddesses would arrive, and that was when the water changed again and opened the landscape for Amphitrite in her human form. "Naruto, you seem very excited," the goddess said to the happy, dark-skinned, tattooed boy, who was like a ball of energy. He didn't even sleep last night, just waiting for the dawning of a new day, and the day where he'd be able to meet a divine being or several divine beings, in addition to Amphitrite, Nanny, and the ocean. Naruto, yes. My mother let me socialize with more divine beings besides you and Nanny. I'm already excited to meet others like me or gods from other mythologies, he said with a gigantic backpack on his back. Apparently the boy packed everything that was his, leaving only things like furniture and appliances. Amphitrite burst out laughing at the demigod's enthusiasm. If she didn't know better, she'd say he wasn't a billion-year-old demigod, but a mere mortal under 12. Good for you, Naruto, she said, smiling at the boy. Amphitrite, but I came to say that Camp Half-Blood is near Washington, but there's no map to guide you, so just get to the city and you might spot a demigod or several demigods in one spot. That could be the Greek camp. Nanny. Then we'll have a long journey, the girl said, confused. But what will we do at that camp? I mean, wasn't Miss Hera hoping Naruto would defeat her godson? Going to that camp should be unnecessary, then, the girl said. Amphitrite, well, before challenging Hercules you need to get the attention of the gods. If you arrive suddenly and challenge him, they won't take you seriously. Unlike how it would be if you arrived being Hera's champion and mine, she said, smiling. Naruto nodded because it made sense. Okay, time to head over there. The blond man began walking back toward the island with a determined stride while everyone watched him retreat. It's the other way, the girl said calmly. Naruto, hearing Moana, turned around and started walking toward the spot the girl pointed to. Let's go this way then, he said, walking toward the water and beginning to walk on it without difficulty. Moana just shook her head at the boy's idiocy, and Nanny laughed tenderly at her friend and protégé's antics. Come on, Nanny. See you later, Amphitrite, the girl said, causing her magic runes to glow and the water tentacle to appear before the girl. She stood on it, reaching for it. While Nanny touched the water, she was covered by a glow, and her true water spirit form rebelled, revealing the girl with a light green fishtail and sea stones covering her breasts. Amphitrite watched the three retreating as she herself slowly disappeared into the water to return to her castle in Atlanta, the burned city her son dominated but which belonged to her husband. Moments later, Naruto could be seen approaching land, which appeared to be a beach, if the umbrellas and tablecloths were any indication. Now that we've arrived, where are we going? He asked Nanny, who emerged from the water in her normal form again. Moana, who arrived a few seconds later, looked around. Let's get to the city. Maybe your divine side can help you feel someone else like you. Naruto nodded and began walking calmly, being followed by both girls until they left the beach and reached what appeared to be the city of Washington, or so the black-haired Hawaiian who had never been here before assumed. Moana, look, is anyone excited to get here? She said, looking at the smiling Naruto, who looked at her with a wink. Naruto, I am very much so. I want to walk around here, see beautiful places, and see the gods and demigods, he said happily, until a minotaur ran down the street in front of Naruto, Moana and Nanny, who looked at that in astonishment and blankly. Is this what makes Washington so special? He said, looking at the creature. They never thought the first thing they'd see would be a half-human bull with asteroids. Naruto, girls, not to alarm you, but that thing is heading toward the woman with the baby, and she doesn't even seem to care or notice. Both girls looked at that in surprise. Nanny, Naruto, are you doing something? She said worriedly. The black-haired man looked at that and nodded. In a flash he shot out at the human bull as the demigod decided to call him. Just as the creature was about to charge at the woman, Naruto appeared above it with a golden glow in his hand. And with a swipe, the creature was sent flying with a hole in its chest, even surpassing the city's buildings. Naruto, you should be more careful, miss. Naruto started looking around to see where the woman was and became confused since there was nothing there. Huh! Where is she? He wondered, looking around in doubt. Approaching the demigod, Moana and Nanny followed behind Naruto, equally confused by the whereabouts of the woman and baby, as they disappeared in the blink of an eye after Naruto struck the creature. Moana, great, we just got here and we already found this. What should we do? She asked, looking at the creature's empty space. Naruto, I say we leave it like that and go find those demigods, he said happily, starting to walk, taking drops from his companions. Someone just magically disappeared and he just forgot about it because of his trip? He's an idiot, Moana whispered, starting to follow him. With that, the three young men continued on their way, and Naruto began trying to sense something or someone with magic or god essence. Although this was very difficult, more so than it should have been for Naruto. Naruto, this is strange. Why can't I feel anyone? Not even the gods. He thought, looking up at the sky, where the gods should be, but he couldn't even feel Hera. Moana, still haven't found anyone, she said, surprised. Naruto shook his head, sighing. They'd been at this for 10 minutes, and he was already losing the joy he'd had before. Could it be a barrier? Nani said. Amphitrite once said that the demigods of Greece have a barrier around their camp so no one who isn't divine can get in. Naruto opened his eyes in surprise when suddenly, as if nothing had happened, he felt a giant dome. It was so big it should have been big enough to hide a camp or more. I think I feel it again. It's over there, he said, pointing to a road they could take. Moana smiled and together with Nani they began walking toward that place while Naruto, with a serious look, began to look back, then returned to the path with his friends. Meanwhile, a shadow on top of a building smiled cruelly, seeing that the boy had apparently sensed it. Looks like father wasn't wrong. My brother is perfect for the job, he said, smiling, his face obscured by his cloak but just as somber as without it. Elsewhere, the three divine beings could be seen walking calmly through a massive forest where the camp was apparently supposed to be. Naruto, are you sure you're okay? We've been walking for ages, he said to cross a big tree. Naruto, now entering the dome, he said, and the girl looked around. Nani, apparently this tree is connected to the dome, perhaps from here on out this is where the camp should be, said the water spirit or goddess calmly. Naruto, exactly. We're almost at the meddler's camp now. It is, said Mestizos. Naruto, thank you. Naruto was surprised to turn around in a hurry, whereupon turning around a man was waiting for him, surprising Naruto. Hello? I said hesitantly, looking at the man, half goat, half horse, half mule. I didn't know it was the lower half of a man. Don't worry, young man. They secretly warned me of your arrival here, the man said. Naruto looked at him doubtfully. So Hera T-dash. Boom. Naruto was cut off when a thunderous roar sounded from the sky, alarming the blonde about any attack. But the man in front of him calmed them down. Don't worry, it happens when you mention a god around here. God names aren't allowed for demigods. It's better to refer to them by their initials or domains, said the half-horse man. Naruto nodded with great hesitation. Okay, so the goddess of marriage sent you to find me? He asked doubtfully. The man nodded hesitantly to the boy. The three of them. They told him they'd be here for a while to face my best student, Heracles, he said as he walked off. Unsure of what to do, the trio of boys followed the man. Naruto. Are you the teacher of this Heracles? You must feel bad because your student agreed to receive a woman as a gift for becoming a god, said the dark-haired man, hands on his head. The half-horse man, beyond what Naruto and his friends thought, Nego shook his head, still smiling. He's my pride, he said sincerely, confusing Naruto. I've trained many demigods throughout my life, and I continue to train more here. But none have ever equaled or will ever equal Heracles and his greatness. Ignoring the gift of becoming a god, Heracles is the greatest demigod. Naruto heard that as unimportant. Just because he's the strongest doesn't make him the best. He's just awesome, strong, and from what I heard, handsome. But apparently he's also a liar, a thief, a con man, and a bunch of other things that don't interest me, the boy said, and the man didn't respond because it was true. Naruto, Heracles isn't the best example for a demigod. He shouldn't even be an example in and of himself. Using him to inspire young people will only harm their future. Having such a monster as an example of a good demigod will do the trick. He finished, looking as they arrived at what was apparently a battlefield, as there were several boys fighting and training, from ages 10 to 16 and 17. Moana, wow, is this a kid's slaughterhouse? Everyone stopped training at Moana's word. What? It seems like they're training to kill themselves in the attempt, she said, and Naruto nodded in agreement. He had trained his entire life and could say from experience that this training has many unnecessary parts that are more of a risk to themselves. With those words, a not-so-feminine-looking girl approached. Do you have a problem with what we're doing? A Russian-looking girl with dark hair said. The girl wore a red headscarf that matched her orange camp shirt. Her hair was dark brown, almost red, and she held a spear in her hand that shot electricity. This was Clarice, legitimate daughter of the god of war and violence, Ares. To avoid any fights, Naruto stood in front of Moana with a small smile. Relax, she was just saying that her training has some useless parts, Naruto said with a smile. Although what I planned did the exact opposite. Since the girl apparently got angry with him now. What are you insinuating? He said as a spear threateningly landed on Naruto's neck. But it seemed unimportant, so Naruto began to think. He hinted that there were unnecessary parts to his training. If he hinted that, he said without noticing the apparent anger of the black-haired woman. Hey, calm down. Let's not argue about anything, said a blond man, who looked about 17 years old, with a scar on his cheek that reached below his eye. He wore normal camp clothes, but he had a sword at his waist. This was Luke, legitimate son of the god of thieves and messenger, Hermes. Naruto looked at the boy and smiled. Hello? He greeted calmly, seemingly ignoring Clarice, who was visibly angered by this. I'm Naruto, he said, shaking the boy's hand. The scarred blonde looked at his hand and smiled as he shook it. Hello, I'm Luke Castellan, son of the god Hermes, he said, and Naruto looked up at the sky in doubt. Luke saw this and smiled. New? I asked, greatly confusing Naruto. You looked up at the sky when I mentioned my father, as if expecting something. I'm guessing you already said the name of a god and a thunderous sound occurred. Naruto, yeah, I still wonder why that happens, he said nervously. Luke smiled. It happens when you refer to a god informally or insult him. He was someone appointed by Lord Zeus thousands of years ago. But it only happens to demigods, he said, smiling. Naruto nodded. Sure. Are you still going to ignore my question? Naruto looked back at the voice, seeing the girl who threatened him with the spear. Oh? Hi, I'm Naruto. The blond man was cut off when his hand was hit by the spear's hilt. It was then placed back against his neck. Stop ignoring my words! You insulted us all and then you want to let it go with that idiotic grin? Well, it's not working, moron! Naruto frowned at the insults. I never insulted your training. I just said you do things that are more easily acquired and are unnecessary in many ways. I can tell you for sure, I've trained for a long time, he said, sure of his words. So? Well, prove it, she said, removing the spear from Naruto's neck. Face me. I'm one of the strongest here. If you're really right, you can easily beat me, she said, smiling. Naruto was about to accept, but someone intervened. I'd better face him, said a voice that everyone recognized and was surprised by, except for Naruto and his friends, who were curious. Luke, Miss Korra, are you sure? Asked Luke. Isn't it a bit exaggerated that you're facing off against a newcomer? He said to the girl named Korra, who was a young woman with dark skin like Naruto, with very light blue eyes that reflected the sky. Unlike the others, he wore blue robes with white trim and loose black pants that seemed to merge with his combat sandals because of bandages, the same bandages he wore on his forearms while fighting. 2 strands of his dark black hair fell around his cheeks, tied back in a ponytail. Chapter 4. Korra looked at Naruto and smiled. Don't worry, I won't be too harsh on him, the girl said, smiling at Naruto, who did the same. Though I think we should leave it for later. Mr. D won't be in favor of fighting right after you arrive. Clarice snorted and walked away with the younger demigods who had been training her for a while. When you fight, let us know. Naruto smiled as he watched them all walk away. Thanks for that, Moana is very sincere, he said, looking at his friend, who snorted because, in her opinion, he was never wrong. Korra, it's nothing. Clarice is like that too. She tends to be very volatile when it comes to her strength and power, she said, smiling. Even if you don't think you're safe, you still have to fight me or everyone will start a revolution to punish her for her insult, she said amusedly, and Naruto nodded, scratching his head nervously. Mr. D never told us that new demigods would come, she said, looking at them confused as she began to walk, and Naruto, Nani, and Moana followed her. Naruto, well, I'm just a demigod. Nani here is a water spirit, and Moana is Moana, he said amusedly, receiving a punch in the ribs. Korra, wait! You're saying she's not a demigoddess. And she? She said, pointing at Nani. Is she a water spirit? She asked, stopping her pacing, causing Naruto and his friends to do the same. Naruto stopped next to her. Yeah. Is that weird? Korra nodded. The barrier doesn't allow anyone not divine to enter here. While the water spirit can pass, they normally don't allow such beings to interact with demigods, especially with your other friend. Those seals on hers should have something to do with it. Who made them? She asked, looking at Moana's tattoos, whose arms were crossed without any interest. Naruto, I made them. Although I made them from my own that my mom made for me, he said, looking at the seals around his body, which, unlike Moana's, didn't shine brightly except when he gets angry. Something that only happens once a century, and that's being generous. Korra looked at them as well and nodded. They look complicated since I can't see their structure or language, she said doubtfully, looking at the runes around the boy's body that she didn't understand. They didn't even look Greek. Naruto, maybe. I don't understand them well either. I only know how to do them from my mom and what each seal does, he said uninterestedly, placing his hands back on the back of his head. Korra nodded at this and decided to continue. Okay, I'll give you all a tour of the camp. You know what it's like to be new and all, she said, leading the young men to follow behind her. This is the bow and arrow training ground, he said, presenting an open field with several target areas for training. Further along, we have the sword, dagger, and spear and shield training ground, he said, pointing to where all the demigods who had previously bothered him and Moana were. There are so many of you here, and at such a young age, Naruto said, somewhat disappointed. Korra looked at this and nodded. Yeah, Hades monsters chase us around here a lot, though most of them leave during the holidays or during school times so they can go unnoticed during those days, she said, watching the children train under Clarissa's guidance. Naruto. So you guys leave this camp when it's vacation? I asked doubtfully. And you can camouflage your divine scent with humans? Korra, yes and no. Some people, with a weak scent, manage to go unnoticed for a while. But there are others, like me, who have a scent too strong for them to disguise themselves, so I have to live here year-round, she said a little dejectedly. But then she smiled. That's why I dress however I want. It doesn't matter so much when no one but them will ever see you, she said calmly. Naruto nodded a little sadly. He knew what it was like to be cut off from the opportunity to know people in the world beyond a simple hello or a glance, since he couldn't live with that person. I'm sorry, he said to the girl, who shook her head. It's nothing. Besides, there are a few who spend time with me here. Most are children of lesser gods, so they leave, but some are children of greater gods, making their stay among humans short. So some simply spend the whole time inside instead of lasting a month outside, he said, remembering his friends. Naruto, glad to hear that, he said calmly. Fine. All that's left is the cabin area. That's where we normally sleep and socialize, especially around the dining room and campfire. Naruto, the campfire doesn't seem to be a very recurring thing, he said, looking at the campfire that had wood so old that he could safely say it had been in that same position for months or days. It was just not dry due to the possible rain. Technology distracts many campers, especially with the intensive workouts they're doing these days due to the increase in monsters in recent years. So when they finish a workout, they prefer to simply go to sleep or use their devices for fun, since they'll have the same routine the next day. Naruto, and which cabin should I stay in? I asked him. Korra looked at him doubtfully, then smiled and shook her head. It doesn't work that way. You have to be claimed by a god to sleep in one's lodge. Your divine parent must signal your existence. Although, since most of those are children of lesser gods without lodges, all those with lesser parents, or who aren't claimed, sleep in the lodge of the god of messengers, Lord Hermes. Naruto. It seems to be a very crowded cabin, he said, looking at the cabin, which was abnormally large. Perhaps it was enlarged to accommodate more and more young people, since at least 5 or more demigods should come each year. If the legends of the Greek gods were rapists and precocious, clearly many young people should come. If they survived those bulls on steroids, of course. Korra, okay. That's the end of the presentation. Now, do you have any questions? She asked, looking at Naruto and noticing the absence of Nani and Moana. Where are your friends? Naruto looked around in confusion. Huh! They were here a few seconds ago, he said, looking to his sides where both young women were missing. I expected this from Moana, but Nani. She would never leave me for anything in the world. Korra smiled calmly. Don't worry, nothing will happen to them in here. Conflicts are resolved with official fights and only with official fights. Those who fight outside of one are punished. He said, but an explosion of blue fire hit a distant part of the camp, surprising Naruto by the suddenness of the attack and the very beautiful color that the fire caused. Unless it's training, Korra said, sighing because she probably knew what was happening. And seeing her expression, Naruto could tell that it happened a lot or it wasn't something very strange in this place. I'll be back in a second, the girl said, disappearing in a blur of speed. Naruto was surprised by the speed, but wanting to know what happened, he also disappeared in a blur of speed. They appeared in a clearing in the forest. Naruto saw 2 people apparently fighting each other. Since they were 2 girls fighting each other. While one of them launched water from the nearest lake and swirled around itself, the other countered with hot blue flames that Naruto could tell weren't normal. That blue fire looks great, he said, sitting on the tree branch. Until a voice caught her attention. I thought I said wait for me over there, Korra said, looking at Naruto, who turned to look at her with a small smile. The black-haired man smiled. Sorry, I got caught in that blue explosion, he said, watching the 2 girls battle, though he noticed that more and more campers were quickly arriving to watch. They sure are agile and good with those elements. Korra, I have to stop this, otherwise they'll start encouraging the fight and it will go further, he said, jumping from the tree branch. I'll help you, he said, following the ponytail girl's actions, landing just as softly as the young woman. Korra, will you be able to hold on? She asked, and Naruto smiled in response. With that, they both began walking among the campers who had formed a circle around the fighting girls. Naruto watched as Nani and Moana stood among the demigods, and Moana was apparently encouraging the fight. Nothing new to him, she's always one for this kind of trouble in general. In the fight, both girls were skillfully throwing and using their respective elements to defend themselves. The water moved around in a vortex, stopping the powerful flames from burning her, and then used this same water to create appendages and attack. The other girl, with her amazingly hot blue flames, was throwing out gigantic flames that created walls of fire that, even when stopped by the water, still left a great heat in the environment, and if she continued like this young woman with her hair in a Japanese bun would win the battle. Are you tired of the same old moves? The young woman asked the dark-skinned girl in blue clothes. The other young woman apparently didn't like this comment, and raised one of her hands, causing the air around her to form a Japanese dragon. I'll show you a new trick then, the water elemental girl said as the meter-long dragon prepared for a charge. The other girl, unafraid of the dragon, simply summoned the usual blaze of fire from her palm, which angered the other girl due to the clear underestimation. The onlookers took a step back, not wanting to get involved, causing Naruto and Korra to retreat through the crowd as well. Let's go up, Naruto said, jumping onto a tree behind them, followed by Korra as they both leaped forward to stop the battle. Both were about to launch their attacks, when Korra appeared in front of the dark-skinned girl, stopping her hand from launching the water dragon, and Naruto, who had appeared in the center of the battle, created a rock wall. Naruto, who had been left on one side of the wall, looked at the girl who was about to attack with that strange blue fire. Hi, I'm Naruto, he greeted with a smile, although he only received an arrogant smile from the young woman. Azula, prodigy daughter of the god Hephaestus, said the daughter of the god of fire, smiling with arrogance and confidence. The 18-year-old girl's clothing was based on a fighting suit that Naruto had seen on one of his trips to China. The clothing consisted of a red high-neck shirt with gold trim, a gold belt around her waist. Her pants were a wine-colored along with wristbands that also had a gold design that was the same design as the shoes that go with the pants. Her hair was now loose, yet held at the back of her head, along with the 2 strands on either side of her delicate yet rugged face. Her eyes were a golden color that matched the designs of her costume, giving her a great look for the daughter of Hephaestus. Naruto's wall was destroyed by Korra, who looked at Azula with the other young woman behind her. Her face was embarrassed, meaning she was scolded by the young descendant of the gods. "Azula, I've told you several times, these fights are already crossing the line," she said, walking seriously toward the girl in red. Katara was a young man with brown hair and dark skin, being humanly Korra's niece and therefore under her responsibility. Her hair, in addition to being brown, had 2 bangs dyed blue, which looked perfect with her blue clothes that were perfect for her body. Azula crossed her arms, paying no attention to what the girl said. "The fight is official, so you can't do anything. The limits are set by the combatants," she said as she turned around and left. Before she could get far, though, Azula turned around. "I'd like to talk to you later," she said, continuing on toward 2 young men waiting for her in the crowd. Naruto didn't understand anything and simply waved goodbye. "Goodbye. Korra, it's always the same with her. This rivalry only brings trouble," she whispered, glaring angrily at the young woman at her side. "Katara, you're grounded until further notice." She told the young woman that she was going to say something, but Naruto spoke instead. "Naruto, isn't that much? I mean, a battle doesn't deserve that, not to mention that no one got hurt," he said, seeing that indeed no one got hurt at all. Korra said nothing and just sighed. "Fine, but if you fight with Azula again, I'll make sure you can't do any activities at camp and you'll stay in Mr. Hermes' cabin. Got it?" The question would prompt the brown-haired girl's assent. "Fine, you can go," she said to the girl, who ran off. Though she turned around and smiled at Naruto. "Thank you, sir," she said, running off again. Naruto was left speechless by what the girl had said and even felt a little downcast. "Moana, do I really look like a man?" he asked the girl who was approaching from the crowd. But the mocking smile that emerged only drew a snort from the black-haired man. "You're just jealous of this body," he said, looking at the girl who smiled. "In your dreams," she said, patting the boy's exposed abdomen as she continued on her way. "We met a girl named Annabeth Chase. She'll be showing us other parts of the camp and what's done on a daily basis, so Nanny and I will be gone for a few hours," she said as she left, while Nanny said goodbye to her almost brother friend to continue on her way with Moana. While Naruto watched this, "You've already made a friend here, so you'll leave me aside in a few days," he said with crocodile tears. Korra's sweat dropped at the demigod's demeanor. He's possibly the son of Apollo or Hermes, given his big boy attitude. Although his skin color would be more in keeping with Hephaestus's family, his beauty resembles that of Aphrodite and perhaps Zeus. Or maybe he's like me, a multiple, she thought, but put that aside. Almost no one was like her in this area. She was always unique and different in this area, and that was what made her the girl in charge of the camp, although she knows that Mr. D gave her that title so she could spend more time on Olympus and not here with them. Naruto, hey Korra, I have a question. Since I arrived, I felt multiple auras from different gods that I also feel in the sky, but is it normal for multiple auras of gods to come from the same demigod? I asked as Korra stopped pacing. Are you asking about my lineage? She said, getting the hint. Well, it's very complicated to understand, but in short, I'm descended from several gods consecutively. Chapter 5. Naruto looked at her with a bit of surprise. So is that strange? He asked doubtfully. Although he believed himself to be somewhat special, he certainly didn't know how special it was to be the descendant of several gods. Korra, technically it's not that special. Most people are probably descended from more than one god, but the divine blood of gods dilutes quickly, so it wouldn't last more than 3 generations in a family. But in my case, I'm the daughter of one god, the granddaughter of another god, the great-granddaughter of another, and the great-great-granddaughter of another, she said calmly as she placed her hands behind her head. It's something new to have a continuous dependence on gods. Normally, a family might have had 2 gods in its branches, centuries or millennia apart. But mine only had one, only decades apart. The brown-skinned boy nodded. That's weird but amazing, I guess, she said, not knowing how amazing or difficult that was, but it was still amazing, or so she assumed from the way the girl said it. And Korra, when will we fight? The girl raised an eyebrow in confusion, then smiled. You barely arrived and you already want a defeat in your arsenal? She asked, smiling, and Naruto did the same. I've never lost a fight and I've fought many strong opponents, and you seem strong so I want to fight you too. He spoke while excitedly bumping his fist against his open shovel. Fighting was truly something he'd always had in his natural state. And it wasn't for nothing, since from what little he knew, his mother was the goddess of battles, struggles, wars, emotions, impulses, and confrontations, along with thousands of other things. So, it's not surprising that he loves fighting. Korra, well, we can fight first thing tomorrow morning if it's not a bother you woke up so early. But I should talk to Master Chiron about the matter, she said, wondering where her centaur master is. After leaving Naruto and company, the man left instantly. Naruto looked at the thoughtful girl and began to think about it himself. What am I supposed to do to get True's attention from here? He wondered doubtfully. From what I see here, there's nothing amazing to do here to get the attention of this PS or Chose. Korra, where can I get a t-shirt? Naruto asked, looking at the girl who came out of his mind and seeing him confused. A t-shirt? I can tell a manager to bring you some early tomorrow morning if you'd like, she said, doubtful of the boy's strange question, though it pulled her away from those thoughts about Master Chiron's whereabouts. Elsewhere. Speaking of Chiron, the centaur could be seen kneeling before the mortal form of the queen and goddess Hera, who looked at the man calmly, although not with much pleasure, given that he was the trainer of Zeus's bastard son. Chiron, there you go, the boy arrived at camp and is apparently getting along well with the others, although he is a bit blunt in what he says, he said, remembering the incident with Clarice. Hera watched this calmly. Good, make sure you give him the best training. I need something to draw the other gods' attention to him so I can claim him as my champion, she said calmly, considering leaving. Which Chiron politely stopped. I think that's no longer necessary. The young demigod will face Zeus's champion to resolve a conflict. There's no date set yet. But it'll probably be tomorrow or in 2 days, he said as Hera smiled. First thing tomorrow morning, the gods will gather by order of Zeus, who seemed very worried. He called Hades on purpose, so it must be something very important and serious, so everyone will be there. Get Naruto to fight young Korra at that time, so I can claim him at the best moment in front of everyone, he said as he slowly disappeared into a pink, yet bright and divine aura. Of course, Mrs. Hera, he whispered, standing up and starting to trot toward the camp, which wasn't far away. Upon arriving, the man saw how all the young people were very calm, and apparently no one had looked for him in those few minutes outside. Night is already falling, Chiron thought, seeing how the sun was rising, and in a few minutes the moon would appear for everyone to see. Teacher! Chiron turned around in confusion when a voice called out from behind him, namely Katara. Master Chiron, Korra has me on detention, the young woman said, seemingly annoyed, and it was obvious she would be. For the young woman, she was too old to suffer punishment for fighting her rival, who was also her cousin. Although this was also because Korra never punished Azula, the young woman clearly wouldn't obey and would simply ignore the punishment. Chiron, if Korra did it, it was for a reason. Did you fight with Azula again? The man asked, looking at the campers, who were mostly chatting among themselves. Katara, seeing what her master had said, crossed her arms. It was an official battle, she said angrily, because Korra really shouldn't punish her in an official battle. After all, it's something to challenge someone and fight that person as long as it's official. And they always announce their battles before they start, even if they're only 2 or 3, it should still count. Chiron shook his head at the young woman's demeanor. Since you're going to fight each other, you just tell 2 or 3 demigods to witness it. That's not official, he said, sighing. Leave that alone. Go to the mess hall for dinner, then go to sleep. I'll talk to Korra about getting your punishment removed tomorrow. Katara smiled as she started to leave, but then stopped. Hey, Master, who was that young man with Korra? He seemed new or something. The young woman asked, stopping her advance. She remembered the boy who intervened on her behalf and helped her reduce her punishment to a minimum. Chiron, that young man is a temporary demigod, and he'll probably leave soon. But you'll find out more about him tomorrow. Don't rush it, he said, walking slowly, leaving Katara wondering if the Master of Nothing had said a few words that were too out of place. Later. Katara, okay, let's sleep at Hermes' cabin, she whispered, smiling as she headed toward the last cabin on the east side, although surprisingly there she found Korra leaving the boy who helped her before. Katara watched their interaction with doubt. They were already friends after just a day of knowing each other. That was new for Korra, although she was always kind. She was also so strict that most of the newcomers hated her, but that was because most of them tended to be crybabies who were never pushed to do anything and had everything handled. Katara, apparently he's not as whiny as that Percy boy. The girl thought, looking at the new boy, who compared to the boy who arrived 2 days ago, this one was better. The other was too childish for her taste, but coming from the city, it was to be expected of him to be so fragile, always complaining about everything. Katara? But the new dark-skinned man, besides his athletic, muscular body, hexy body, and godlike face, looked like he was from the woods. As if he'd lived his entire life in nature without any help, and seeing as he didn't have any shoes, his fantasy of a semi-god Tarzan might be real, especially because of his hair, though soft and smooth, also free. As if he'd never used conditioner in his hair, and had only sustained himself with nature itself. Katara, damn puberty, she thought. Because she always ended up creating fantasies with demigods with some brutal origin story. Her cousin told her it was because of her age. She was entering her 16th year, so things like her having fantasies and thinking differently from others was normal. Or to a certain extent, it was. Katara. The girl snapped out of her mind when she saw Korra, who was also her cousin, frowning at her. What's going on? She asked, confused. Korra sighed when she saw that the girl hadn't frozen. I asked you what you were doing standing here, she said as Katara blushed and stood up. Korra looked at her with doubt and suspicion. Were you thinking about men again? She asked with a serious look. Katara blushed as she shrugged in embarrassment. I told you, when this happens, don't go with the flow. Cut out those thoughts, or you'll just blush and become a pervert, like the daughters of Aphrodite. She whispered the last bit. Katara burst out laughing at the last not-so-funny joke. Well, I couldn't help it this time. Here I saw was just too hot. Korra smiled at how her little cousin was acting. Naruto, right? She asked when Katara blushed even more. Don't worry, since he's shirtless and wearing all those runes, any boy your age would be like that, she said, smiling. But two very beautiful girls, both blonde and with long, wavy hair, walked by, and what they were talking about got Korra a little excited. Well, not just the ones your age specifically. Katara blushed at that. Okay, I'll go to sleep. We will talk tomorrow, she said, running off toward the cabin under the watchful eye of a smiling Korra. She was only 2 years older than her cousin, and Inai was only a few months older than her cousin, but with what happened a few years ago, technically their relationship feels like that of an adult and a child. Korra, she's such a fool, I wonder how long she'll be able to hold back sleeping next to the new guy, she said, laughing as she retreated to the brightest and most radiant cabin, which looked more like a Greek palace than a cabin, with its white glow even at night and golden door. Being the champion of the chief god of Olympus was sometimes advantageous, although it earned the envy and indifference of many demigods and nymphs for not even being the daughter of the god and having access to such a prestigious place. Good evening, Lord Zeus, I whisper as if it were routine, while following his step and entering the palace that let out a shine of pure gold when I opened the door, the same shine that disappeared when the door closed again, leaving everything as before. The next day, we find ourselves in the Hermes cabin, where Naruto was sleeping snugly with a sheet on over his shirt. He needed something to keep warm, since the cold and heat barely affect him. That's while he's in battle. When he's calm, both affect him more. The boy in the empty cabin slept peacefully and comfortably, until the sharp sound of a toy trumpet caused Naruto to frown, opening one eye and looking at a young woman of possibly 17 or 18 years old, extremely beautiful. Before Naruto's eyes, a girl with loose, wavy blonde hair, blue eyes, freckles on her cheeks, and a camp uniform, along with short yen shorts, a coat around her waist, and a sword in her hand stared back at the Hawaiian demigod. "You whistle in your sleep." With that strange and hard-to-believe statement, the blonde-haired girl calmly walked out of the empty cabin, leaving Naruto still lying on his bed, staring at her retreat. That was strange, the boy thought, not understanding what was happening. He wasn't very good at getting up early, and although he could tell it was already past 6 a.m., he sensed it was 7 a.m., almost 8 a.m., which made him sigh. Trying to stand up, he felt a small weight on his chest that caused confusion. It wasn't a noticeable weight, so he guessed it was his pillow, but when he felt it his head shook his head, so what could it be? As he tried to remove the sheet, whatever was underneath shifted, causing the sheet itself to move, revealing the person inside. When he removed it, he revealed someone he wasn't expecting. You're not Korra's friend?" he asked, looking at the young Katara on his chest. The girl, who was yawning from her recent awakening, opened her eyes to look into Naruto's face. They both stared at each other without moving, equally confused by the random situation of waking up next to another person without even remembering having fallen asleep together. Or at least that was the case for Naruto, since Katara didn't know why he was there. At least she remembered when she entered the boy's bed. This never happened. "Okay?" she said to the 15-year-old girl, getting off the young man's chest and without looking back, leaving the cabin, leaving the still lying Naruto, who was even more confused. "Naruto, this is strange," he thought, watching as the girl simply walked away. "What the hell is going on at this camp? I've only been here one night, and it already seems like the strangest thing in my life. Although, really, my life wasn't that strange until I met Percy." Sighing, the demigod stood up, his jacket off like the day before, his muscles and tattoos still showing. "I need some clothes." The young man was cut off when he saw a camp jacket on his table. Possibly Korra or the same blonde from earlier had left it there. Putting on his jacket, the black-haired man looked down at himself. "It's not that bad, although a brighter orange would be better," he said, looking at his jacket, which was orange, albeit a lighter shade than the one he actually liked. Leaving the hut, Naruto was a little surprised to see all the youngsters, even children ages 10 to 13, training hard, doing unnecessary things like yesterday, but they were still pushing themselves too hard. "They sure are," he said, whistling. "Are you surprised?" Korra asked, standing behind Naruto, who didn't seem to mind or be surprised by her presence. "A little bit, although I still say it's unnecessary to do that abdominal exercise. It only loses unnecessary fat from other parts of the body that shouldn't be lost." Korra looked at what exercise Naruto was referring to. "Now that you mention it, I'll have to talk to Clarice about it later. Even if it's late, reason doesn't negate our battle. Master Chiron declared it will be in 2 hours, so you'd better warm up," she said, leaving, possibly to warm up herself or train some demigods. Apparently, the older or more experienced ones trained the younger ones, like Clarice, the young blonde son of Hermes and the girl who woke him up. "Naruto, I should try some of these things," he said, walking. "What should I try? Bow and arrow? Sword? Spear and shield? Powers or elements? Or hand-to-hand combat? Why not everything?" he said, smiling, as he headed toward the bow and arrow training grounds, where a young blonde man with straight, shiny hair, wearing camp clothes and carrying a golden bow, was teaching some youngsters. "Okay, shoot these vines." The young man was cut when 3 arrows hit the center of 3 of the vines 15 meters in front of the boys. Looking back, the blonde saw Naruto, who was standing more than 5 meters away from them, holding a strange bow. The bow was made of precious metals with a rigid and sturdy design, yet very athletic for constant movement. "Good shot," he said, approaching Naruto, who smiled, still holding the bow. "Thank you," he responded with a friendly smile. "Are you new here? I've never seen you before," said the straight-haired blonde, shaking Naruto's hand. By the way, my name is Lee Fletcher, son of the god of music and the sun, Apollo, and leader of my cabin. Naruto, nice to meet you, my name is Naruto. And yes, I'm new, although I thought everyone knew about me from yesterday's discussion, he said, laughing nervously at that. Lee, so you were the one Clarice fought with? She was talking about you all night with Luke and Azula, he said, amused, remembering that part. Naruto, it seems like I really bothered her with that comment, even though it was just a supportive one, he said, smiling. She possibly hated me. Lee, don't worry, it doesn't matter who it is. Clarice won't hate him for long, you and her might even get along, said the blonde with a smile. Naruto thought about it, she might be right. Having new friends was always good. That aside, those shots were pretty good. And adding that it was a 3-in-1, you've practiced bow and arrow before, right? He asked doubtfully because that shot wasn't from a novice. Naruto, I trained my skills for years. When you're bored, there's nothing better than training. Well, fighting is also better, but that only works when there are more than two of you, he said, amused to remember how he never had anyone to fight with, until he met Moana, who faced him whenever she wanted. Lee, and why did you come closer? Seeing as you didn't just walk away, I'm assuming you didn't shoot those arrows to show off, he said, looking doubtfully at the dark-skinned, black-haired boy. I really wanted to train. I have a battle with Korra in 2 hours. So I wanted to try a few activities before the fight, to get more accustomed to the fighting methods here, he said with his hands on his head in a nonchalant manner. Fletcher understood his point and nodded. Well, Korra doesn't fight like us. She's so strong that our fighting style is nothing, so she fights in her own way. Although if you still want to use our style to warm up, I can help you with everything, he said calmly. Naruto thought about it, but nodded. While it won't be able to analyze Korra, it will warm up her rusty, technically old, demigod body. Fine, although we can leave the arrows here, I want to go fight someone hand to hand, he said happily and excited to fight someone hand to hand. Fletcher, that's difficult. I take care of the bow and arrow trainers, but I have someone who can help you, he said, and Naruto nodded. It was the same for him. Lee Fletcher looked at the young men training, but when he noticed the boys had left, he smiled and started walking toward another training spot. Follow me, I'll take you to the hand-to-hand combat instructor. Naruto smiled and followed him through the other training grounds that didn't interest him, until they reached a circular arena where several young men were gathered around him. They were watching the fight of 2 other young men who were using a very peculiar style. Naruto, this is all very well, but who's in charge of all this? I asked, noting that most of them were only young people from 10 to 15 or 16 years old. Fletcher, well, Ty doesn't usually spend much time here. He goes out every so often to play around without paying much attention to his students, he said nervously because of how the girl in charge of hand-to-hand fights between semi-gods was. Although they didn't have enough physical strength to fight monsters, this way of fighting was perfect because it gave them an advantage over monsters or any creature. Naruto, so he's not coming? I asked doubtfully. It'll probably take an hour or less before we get there, she said, and Naruto sighed. He really wanted to have a fight against someone before Korra, to learn her fighting style or basic thoughts. But apparently he'll have to find out during his fight with the demigoddess. Naruto, it doesn't matter anymore, I'll be fighting Korra in less than 2 hours. I'd better warm up with some exercise and get ready, he said, crossing his arms because he really wanted to fight, more than just knowing about Korra, but also because he loved fights. Especially the ones that were hand-to-hand. Fletcher, I feel sorry for you, he said, smiling nervously, while Naruto huffed at not having anything interesting to do before fighting Korra. Doesn't matter, I'm just going to get something to eat and then face her, he thought. They nodded as he headed to the dining room. Chapter 6. Time had passed and you could see everyone, or most of the demigods or all the camp owners, like the centaurs or nymphs who usually roamed around the sides of the camp. Already in the center of the circle, Naruto and Korra could be seen preparing on either side of the makeshift circle. Both of them were fully preparing for battle, both of them putting bandages on their forearms and hands for the battle. while Moana smiled at the boy. "I hope you win," she said, drawing a smile from the dark-haired boy. He high-fived Moana and stepped out into the circle, where Korra was waiting for him, ready to fight. "Hey Korra, how many times have you lost?" Naruto asked, getting into a fighting stance. Korra thought about it for a bit, as she also got into a fighting stance. Just like Naruto thought, she was different from the other campers, but at the same time, she had that same stance. "I've lost twice in everything. But I've never lost in battles," she said, smiling, ready to attack. Naruto smiled. "I like being people's first time in that area," the dark-haired man said, smiling as Korra prepared to launch the first attack, taking a quick punch. Naruto managed to block with his forearm and smiled to throw a kick that Korra blocked with a slight move away, to counterattack at super speed with a multi-kick attack while doing a handstand. Naruto attempted to sweep his hands, causing Korra to get back on her feet, before launching a kick that surprisingly came accompanied by a crescent of super hot flames. Naruto, who blocked the kick, had to stop after being sent skidding by the blow. Looking at his forearm, he was surprised because the flames had managed to slightly burn his forearm. Something that not even the lava of a volcano could do. But he quickly healed as if he'd never been harmed. "That was amazing. Do you control fire, or was it just a speed thing?" I asked doubtfully. "Korra, did you notice?" I asked, a little embarrassed. "Yes. I used high-powered air to create fire through friction, since I can't use flames naturally," she said, scratching her head in embarrassment. "Naruto, that's incredible. I can only use rock because I learned it from a friend," he said, remembering the god of earth and fire, who was represented as a volcano in his domain. The volcano kindly taught him how to use earth and a bit of fire, but he never managed to do anything more than divert the heat because he was too lazy. "Korra, let's stop talking, it's time to get much more serious," she said to prepare herself, and doing a kind of dance. Naruto, due to slight vibrations in the ground, moved away when a pillar of earth emerged in the place where it had been before. Naruto braced himself, as a rune on his shoulder glowed and a type of staff made of wood and different elements appeared in a golden glow in his right hand. And hitting this against the ground, a torrent of water fell on Korra, who surprised manipulated this water to create a dome of air, leaving her totally untouchable. Although she had to jump over a pillar of earth that tried to hit her from behind, and while she was in the air, Naruto, who was behind her, hit her with a kick that sent her to the ground, but even so she landed well on her feet. And using her control over the surrounding water, she blocked the torrent of fire that shot out of the multi-elemental staff toward the young leader. "They're serious," Clarice whispered, far beyond surprised. It seems the new demigod was much more than he expected. "Hey Annabeth, no, only children of Poseidon can handle water." The blonde Annabeth, who was the girl who had woken Naruto up this morning, looked at a young black-haired boy with blue eyes like the sea. This was Percy Jackson, a new demigod who was here a few days before Naruto. "Annabeth, anyone can control the elements, as long as their divine parent has that dominion. And there are many gods of water, sea, ocean, or rain. Although that staff seems to be more of a divine weapon or something similar," she thought, the last thing looking at Naruto. The black-haired man, who was on top of a tree still throwing powerful flames towards Korra, prepared himself when he saw that the flames were repelled and counterattacked with the water he had summoned before. Until he had to jump from the tree due to the powerful air cut that seemed like a saw as it spun to cut everything in its path, which followed the path, cutting several trees in the distance, leaving a trail of destruction of falling trees. And though she didn't know where it came from, several angry shouts, possibly those beings of nature, came from behind, booing Korra, which tried to apologize to those beings of nature. "Naruto, looks like they're mad at you," he said, looking behind him where several nature beings were booing, some even retreating. "Korra, don't worry, they'll calm down quickly," he said, returning to his fighting stance, which Naruto copied with the staff still in his hand. "It seems that weapon gives him control of elements beyond Earth. If I take it away from him, he'll win," he said, getting into a stance. Naruto was surprised when a thick curtain of fog rose up, covering his field of vision. "Is he using moisture to create this? He certainly controls the elements he uses." he thought as he moved the staff, bringing with it a strong current of air that blew away all the fog, leaving the battlefield visible, but not Korra, who was nowhere to be seen. Or nowhere visible to the campers, who even looked among themselves in doubt as to the location of their leader. Naruto lightly tapped his ankle, causing the ground to split open, and from there, Korra stepped out as lava quickly followed her. Korra quickly, using her control over water, covered the lava with it, and then quickly froze it, leaving the ice and volcanic rock in the center. Korra, more seriously? I asked, looking at Naruto, who made the staff disappear, and with the same golden glow, another weapon appeared in his hand. The weapon, which was a type of butcher's sword, but unlike any other sword. Instead of being made of some kind of metal, it was made of ice, a cold and sharp ice. Korra was surprised by the weapon. He can create weapons, or he has some vast store of magical souls in that rune on his shoulder, she thought, because it was the only logical thing for the boy, since she didn't think such weapons could just appear out of thin air. In a flash, Korra had to block with a frozen water dagger, Naruto's butcher's sword. But as expected, the dagger sliced cleanly through, ending with it hitting the ground, and that created something everyone stared at in amazement. Moana, it's already happening, isn't it? The Hawaiian woman asked, looking at Nani, who was nervously scratching her head for her friend. Yeah, but it must be for fun. Her mother is usually like that in battle, the girl said, standing in front of her and all the other demigods. A huge accumulation of ice, measuring more than 60 meters, towered over everyone. It covered the entire 50 square meters of the battlefield, obscuring what was happening inside what they assumed was a labyrinth of ice. Percy, that's incredible. Can I do the same? He thought because he saw the camp leader freezing the water, that means water could go through its 3 states of matter, solid, gaseous, and liquid. Annabeth, if you try it and get hurt, I'll keep you bedridden for a month, said the girl looking at Percy, who scratched his head because his friend knew very well what he was thinking at that moment. With Korra, the girl, who was inside a labyrinth, was falling from a large pillar of ice. Upon contact with the ice, she ran away because ice spikes appeared wherever they walked, although they couldn't reach her with her high speed. Korra, who was smiling because this was a great sacrifice, looked around carefully, searching for the boy. If these attacks come out on contact, that means he's attacking in the same place. That gives me the surprise attack, he thought, looking at the surrounding places. But there was nothing in sight. More than 50 meters in a labyrinth was not easy to get out, but happy with the attacks coming out of the ground and walls, it would be quite a challenge for Korra. Already with Naruto. The black-haired man still had the butcher-style sword in his hand. He left it stuck in the ground and flashed his shoulder rune again, causing the wooden bout to appear in his hand again, ready for use. Naruto, let's get back to the battle, he said to run away. He himself knew nothing about the labyrinth because he created it at random, and he could not manipulate this ice since it came from the fire of the forge of the creation of everything. A primordial fire created by the god of creation, or YHWH, and this fire was the source of everything, both primordial beings and the universe. In other words, a primordial ice that came from the same creator of those supreme beings, even the gods and titans. Not to mention that the fire of the forge of creation was extremely harmful to all beings other than primordial, or higher beings. Like their mother, Chaos itself, Shiva, Izanami, and Izanagi. He barely had a weapon of this caliber because of his mother, since his own weapon creation barely reached the level of divine gods. Naruto from above. He smiled to look at a good angle where he could attack Korra. And that was heaven. With the campers. They were alert. They hadn't heard any noise in more than 5 minutes, so everyone assumed that the battle had ceased or both black-haired men hadn't met at all inside the labyrinth. But her doubtful thoughts were put to rest by a type of bird with mostly red wings and black ends, with a completely white underside. Its tail was a combination of 3 black and 3 yellow stripes, matching the sharp claws on its feet. Until that eagle transformed into the black-skinned boy who with his bow launched 3 fire arrows, which caused a great explosion of flames to happen inside the labyrinth, as expected. He was answered with multiple air bullets that he had to dodge by turning back into an eagle to return to his normal human form, and once again launch fire arrows that caused explosions inside the ice labyrinth, where a smiling Korra gazed up at the eagle in the sky. This thing attacks me automatically upon touching it, and most importantly, I can't manipulate the super cold ice in this labyrinth, and to top it all off, it has the advantage in the sky," said the girl on a pillar of earth so as not to touch the ice. While still firing air bullets, which were small, highly rotating spheres of air, they had a stronger chance of penetrating. "I need to get out of here," he said, as with one attempt, he hit the ground of his pillar, causing that from the ground. To the campers' surprise, lava began to spurt out, even melting, little by little, the primordial ice. Something very surprising that Naruto watched from the top of a tree. The ice melting little by little was very beautiful and pretty due to its uniform melting. Naruto, although Mom never said it couldn't be destroyed, this is surprising, the black-haired man thought, looking attentively. Korra was amazing. Her power seems to come from more than just genetics, like little Katara or the girl named Azula. It's not just from the genes of gods, or not at all, it's something more natural to her, spiritually to her. Spiritual powers? He wondered doubtfully, looking at the ice, which had just melted into a large trench from which gallons and gallons of lava poured out. He must have dug deep to extract that much lava. Although it was obvious that primordial ice, even though it was vulnerable to anything other than control, was still ice far beyond normal. Naruto left the games and decided to fall from the treetops, right in front of Korra. Korra was serious about using so much energy to release it, and she had to store so much lava again to avoid damaging the environment. "Really?" Korra, totally serious. She answered seriously and determinedly as her eyes were lightly covered by her hair, thinking of using everything she had without holding back. It awakened something in her. And Naruto, who didn't know that, decided to return each blow with the same thing Korra used in her previous attacks, so he let go of his bow in the golden glow in which she appeared. "Good." Naruto launched himself at Korra but was met with an earth fist that knocked him back. He was ready to strike back, having already gauged her strength. But he didn't think the girl would enhance her strength with an element. Kicking Korra hard, the girl blocked him with a rising wall of earth. Then, a pillar rose from the ground and slammed into the raven's jaw. Then he had to block a strong gust of wind that almost blew him away, but just as he expected. It was just Korra's distraction that quickly punched him in the stomach, but this blow was enhanced with a fist covered in dirt that sent Naruto flying. "Looks like we already have a winner," Annabeth said with her arms crossed. Korra apparently just won, and judging by how the battle went, I could tell. As Korra's friend, she was pushed to her limits, but she clearly held back. She only used 3 bending techniques: air and ground, and a little bit of water. So, even though the new guy demonstrated a level far superior to any other demigod in the group, he was still below Korra. "That doesn't matter. The idiot owes me a public apology, and I'll enjoy it," Clarice said, smiling. He admitted it. The boy was super strong, but the deal was that he had to admit that his way of fighting was inferior to that of the camp and apologize in front of everyone, thus humiliating himself. Korra, strange, his presence just moved and disappeared. She thought, looking at where Naruto's body had gone, confused. Her eyes still blank and shining, something she herself didn't know why or what was even happening. Although he had to stop thinking when a pillar of earth came out of the ground, but due to the vibrations he was able to easily dodge it and then use his control over the air to float a little and keep his distance from the ground. Something that somewhat surprised the campers. They had clearly never seen Korra do anything like this, and several of them respected Naruto for pushing the girl to use abilities he never used on any of them. Korra, he really disappeared. She thought because she couldn't sense Naruto in any area. She couldn't feel the air being intervened by it, she couldn't feel its kinetic energy, nor its vibrations in the ground, nor its bodily moisture, and strangely for her, she couldn't feel things she hadn't felt before, like her heartbeat. Korra quickly dodged several rocks that emerged from a corner of the forest, but she didn't see Naruto. Until, in front of her, a rock hand tried to grab her, but it was easily dodged. Above. Korra's mind quickly reacted by looking up, where Naruto fell and trying to hit him. Korra was dodged and then received a blow to the jaw, lifting her slightly off the ground and then receiving a kick to the face that sent her crashing into a rock, almost completely destroying it. Naruto, who had a calm face, looked at Korra, who began to stand slowly, even bleeding a little from her head. A type of water with a greenish color came out of her hand and began to heal, leaving Naruto amazed by the healing water. Korra, I don't like your eyes. True darkness lies within that gaze of yours. Naruto was confused. Korra had just spoken with multiple voices? And what did she mean by her eyes filled with darkness? I asked. They were a light honey color, but it wasn't that bad. You're not Korra, are you? The question that no one else but Korra heard. He hovered in midair, as Korra, or whatever was on his mind, didn't respond and continued to stare at Naruto, very seriously. Reveal yourself, you're not real. Your presence doesn't go beyond a simple object, he said, pointing accusingly at Naruto, who raised an eyebrow. It's not really you, said a second voice, as the earth opened up and let out the real dark-haired man, while the apparent clone collapsed into rubble, revealing that it was only an earth clone. That's not even possible. He created a clone. A real clone with a mind and movements of its own. Annabeth thought, surprised. That clone, beyond being literally earth, had a mind, consciousness, voice, thoughts, bodies, and free will. It was like a completely independent being, as if the new camper had created life. Moana, that idiot won't lose. If he does, I'll hit him so many times he won't want to die. She thought the last thing with a kind smile that no one around her bought. It was too kind. Naruto, whose eyes were completely black and had a void-like hue. It was as if the abyss was reflected in Naruto's eyes. Like Korra, he didn't know his eyes were that way. So, if you're not Korra, who are you? I asked, looking at Korra, who once again ignored the question. We are Korra, but at the same time, we are not. Think of us as the Korra of the past and the Korra of the present, but also the one who represents the one above all, Korra said, with multiple voices speaking. Naruto, I didn't understand, but if you give me a good fight, nothing you said will matter, he said, getting back into a fighting stance. He felt his strength was much greater than before, something that was incredible. His strength was abysmal to the point of surpassing Korra as if nothing had happened before, but now his strength seemed to know no limits. Naruto began to stomp his feet, until after several blows, 2 large rocks, each over 10 meters tall, attempted to crush Korra from both sides. Korra, or whatever was controlling her, placed their hands on either side of her, stopping the 2 mini-mountains from crushing her, and using their earth-bending, stopped both mountains from advancing toward crushing her. Although it was difficult Although Naruto's control over the elements was a little poor due to his lack of training, at this moment they both seemed to be masters of the elements due to the mysterious power their eyes reflected. In the struggle, Korra jumped back to let both heads collide and taking advantage of the distraction. Naruto hit the ground and surprisingly, more than 5 copies of Naruto emerged from the ground and leaving their brown skin on the ground, turning Naruto's human color, and their appearance was the same. Although the clones lacked a few expressions, they were very well made, and their expressions ranged from disinterest or ignorance, preferring to stare at the trees or the demigods rather than the fight. Korra, tornado. He thought as he placed his hand in a special shape, creating a powerful tornado around his body. It began to spin at high speed, growing larger in the process. And as many expected, that air tornado began to turn into fire due to the high friction of the tornado. The now abysmal and hot fire tornado that bothered several of the spectators even with the barrier that doesn't let any magic through, the heat of the tornado is natural so it does affect them. The fire tornado stopped as Korra stopped floating, dropped to her knees, and her eyes began to fade and flicker repeatedly. Although she steadied herself, Korra's hand began to shake with obvious fatigue. Perhaps because this was the first time she'd ever sought something like this, or perhaps because whatever was dominating Korra at this moment was fading. Naruto, you're already tired. Let's give one last blow, and I hope it's good, said Naruto raising his fist that was covered by rock, which ignited into fire and the rock melted, turning into lava. "Korra, I'll destroy you with the next blow," she said as her fist was covered in air and began to spin at high speed. The fist ignited into fire, and then, blades of air spinning as they closed around the flames. Both of them ready, they prepared to launch themselves at each other, causing several demigods to worry. "This has to be stopped. If one hits the other, they'll both die," Katara said, watching as they were both about to launch themselves at each other. Annabeth, who was the most thoughtful, nodded. "Those who can intervene from a distance, do it now," the girl said. And as she said, several demigods stood in front of them. Katara, being one of them, called water from the nearby lakes and rivers and began to swirl it around her to stop both boys from launching themselves at each other. And at that moment, Katara's water surged forward at high speed, attempting to position herself at the center of the fighters' attacks. But surprisingly, it was joined by other attacks from various basic elements. They were all stopped by a gigantic wall of blue flames, and before anyone could react, Naruto and Korra's attacks collided violently as a loud explosion erupted. Boom! Both Naruto and Korra flew off in different directions, landing on the ground less than 5 meters apart. All the demigods were stunned by the attacks. But at the same time, Katara worried about her aunt/cousin, who was standing with Naruto. They still hadn't gotten up. "There!" Katara remained silent in concern. Everyone remained the same, no one wanting to move, waiting at least 5 minutes for someone to move. But seeing that time was about to pass, Annabeth, as Korra's second in command, began to move to check on the combatants. Fletcher, who was one of the best at healing, followed her. But before anyone could move, something happened. "Wow! That's a good fight, although the one I had with that wolf head was more intense. That one really left me confused and with a lot of doubts," Naruto said, raising his head while grinning widely, as if he hadn't just charged an explosion in his face. The boy, whose eyes had returned to their normal color, looked at Korra, who also began to move. Although unlike him, her eyes were still that white that said Korra wasn't there. Naruto walked over to Korra and smiled at her. "I don't know you, but you're awesome. We should fight again," Naruto said to the entity controlling Korra, who, uninterested, didn't react. "Korra, this won't be the chance. But at some point, I will destroy your darkness and protect with my light the one true above all," she said before finally fading away, leaving Korra's eyes to return. Korra became confused and began to blink, confused. She couldn't remember anything. What was she doing on the ground? Why was she in so much pain? And most of all, why did Naruto have a tiara-shaped symbol on his head? Wait! Tiara! Chapter 7. The black-haired girl looked at Naruto's head, who was still standing in front of Korra. On top of his head he had 2 symbols that shocked the entire camp except for Moana and Nani, and a little Percy because he didn't know the symbols, although he didn't know what they meant. Everyone was like that, because in addition to Naruto being claimed, the symbols were unprecedented, not because they were unknown, but because they were seals never seen before, because the owners were gods who would never have demigod children, or so most people thought. One of the symbols was a tiara, an extravagantly shaped and very tall tiara, and the other was a trident fused with another tiara, indicating who the owners were: Hera, Queen of Olympus. This is demonstrated by the gigantic tiara showing her as the supreme queen of the Greek pantheon, and Amphitrite, queen and goddess of the seas, demonstrated by the trident and tiara, stating her position as queen and wife of Poseidon. Everyone stood still for a second. No demigod knew what to do. The boy had also been claiming his second day. He was claimed by the Queen of Olympus and the Queen of the Seas, which is confusing but surprising. How is that possible? 2 gods claimed him, and he's a demigod. That doesn't make sense. Percy heard his friend Annabeth whisper, thinking of something that might clear everything up. But the shock was so great that his mind still couldn't let go of the boy claiming him for the Queens of Olympus. Chiron, okay. Now everyone calm down. This takes a little explaining, announced the centaur, walking towards Korra and Naruto, and standing next to the black-haired Hawaiian. He looked at him. None of these seals appeared because he was the son of a god, they're just proclamations for Naruto to be here. to be the champion of the ladies Hera and Amphitrite. Everyone in the camp grew even more astonished. The woman who hates demigods the most has claimed one. This day is certainly crazy, but Zeus won't take this well, Azula thought with an intrigued smile. Her grandfather, on Ares' side, clearly won't take this very well. I wish I could be there to enjoy this tremendous argument, what a shame, I whisper, smiling sadistically at how awkward the argument between two gods would be. Katara, this won't be good. How will Lord Zeus react? And Grandpa Poseidon? This will be a very big problem. Just as Katara finished thinking, as the sky instantly darkened and thunder and lightning began to appear in the sky, as if the strongest storm in the entire history of New York was about to happen. And all this arose in Olympus, home of the gods. Mount Olympus/Council of Gods. We found ourselves in an abnormally large hall of gods, where these same gods were. Although a huge argument was raging between Hera and Zeus over the recent revelation of the man half the room assumed to be a demigod of Hera's. Since they had stopped seeing Camp Half-Blood when the claims suffered by the new demigod son of Hera were revealed. Although others saw him more as a possible son of Amphitrite and a possible champion of Hera, Poseidon clearly disagreed with this version. Although he hadn't seen his wife in a few days due to being in the mortal world, he knew she wouldn't deceive him. I'll speak seriously with her when I return. The god Poseidon thought he was an adult, physically about 29-30 years old, with blue hair long to his back and very fine clothes worthy of royalty, which consisted of a white robe with a black belt that had a golden symbol that was a 4-pointed star and a dark blue cape with golden shoulder pads that reached the back of her feet, complementing her hair very well. At his side was his older brother Hades, god of the dead and king of the underworld. Hades, unlike how many described him, Hades was a young man apparently younger than 27. Perhaps about 25 or 23, with very long black hair that matched his black eyes. His clothing consisted of a completely black robe with a crimson ribbon at the waist and a medallion with the characteristic symbol of a 5-pointed star on his neck. Hades was very upset about all this. Today was his favorite day of the year, the day his wife Persephone began her 6 months in his domain, allowing him to live peacefully without having to attend these gatherings. The only reason the god of the dead came was because he knew his younger brother would start attacking his kingdom out of annoyance. And those attacks would only leave him the peace he had from being with Persephone, and he didn't want that. Not for the next 6 months to come. Hades, tired of his two younger brothers' argument, decided to speak up. Zeus, make up your mind, because the meeting is on. I'm very busy, he said, stopping the argument that had broken out between his brothers. He had just lied since he wasn't busy. He was never busy this time of year, but it was better than Zeus continuing the argument, so I delayed it. Angry at being interrupted. Zeus, who was a long-haired, electric old blonde who only wore a white tunic that left his entire chest open, looked at his older brother with an angry expression. Sighing calmly, Zeus decided to sit down, and giving his wife a look, continued. I called you here to discuss an important matter, he said, gaining the attention of the 12 Olympian gods. But that can wait. Hera has things to explain to me, he said when all the gods who had given him their attention returned to their own business, which was everything except paying attention to the argument between the two spouses. Zeus glared at his wife again, angrily. How could you have a son, let alone a bastard demigod? Did you just say all that nonsense about being loyal out of hypocrisy? He asked angrily. And Hera frowned even more angrily. I already told you he's not my son! How much longer will I have to say it? She shouted angrily at the king of Olympus, who frowned. Do you want to make me look stupid? He shouted angrily, with thunder echoing all around him. For even on Olympus, the powerful thunderclaps affecting humanity at that moment could be felt. Amphitrite never leaves the seas, I don't feel her in the skies, and Apollo never looks down on her from his chariot. But you always walk through the human world, it's clearly yours. Hera, screw you Zeus. I already told you, I claimed him because he'll be my champion. Damn it, she said very angrily, causing several at the table to look a little interested in the discussion. These being Dionysus, Hephaestus, Ares, Hermes, and Apollo, who are the most childish or playful on Olympus. And what right do you have to talk about a hypocrite? She said, pointing accusingly at her husband. Zeus, I lowered my divinity for you. I did everything to make you loyal. I transformed into every woman you saw in the different kingdoms, abandoning my bucking pride. What are you doing? You look at another woman, and you can't even wait to get back to Olympus, and you want to sleep with her. At this point in the discussion, even Hades was a little attentive. Hera never shouted, much less cursed with so many different profanities, clearly being the queen of Olympus. But to see Hera not only speaking the truth to Zeus but also cursing him, she was also facing it. Many gods, mostly the 12 of Olympus themselves, did not help Hera in these discussions or about Zeus because the goddess herself used to simply leave her advice and help to try to make her marriage with Zeus perfect. But now that Hera was facing Zeus, she was possibly thinking about what many, or rather everyone in the room, advised her one day. Hera, you know, Zeus, this is over. No more time, no more second chances. You and I are done here forever. She said, and everyone in the room, except Zeus, smiled like Ares, Apollo, and Artemis, or just gave a slight smile like Dionysus, Hermes, and Hades. Zeus, oblivious to the other's condition, frowned. You can't leave me. You are the goddess of marriage, and breaking up a marriage is beyond you. What would others think of this? Even a goddess couldn't achieve a lasting marriage, let alone mortals, and that will bring havoc. He said desperately, even without showing it. He didn't want to lose one of the most beautiful women on Olympus. It was something he boasted about his entire immortal life. If you leave me, you'll no longer be the queen of Olympus. She threatened, and this time everyone remained silent. That was direct. Now all that was left was to look at Hera and her response. Do you really think I care? She asked angrily, glaring even more angrily at her almost not husband. Hera, Zeus. There is no god on Mount Olympus who, no hell. There is no god in all existence who respects me for being the queen of Olympus. Everyone, even having me, still sees me as Zeus's sycophant or the damned one who kills your conquests. My entire reputation on Olympus is reduced to being the bad guy for killing the women you bet with. Zeus frowned. Humans would suffer from this too, he said, now annoyed at not knowing what to say to stop Hera from letting him. The woman was too convinced, and it was really hard to say anything decent to improve the situation. The king of Olympus begged all the primordials to see if any of them could help him, which clearly wouldn't happen because none of them cared about their love lives. Not even his life in particular. I say women will begin to value themselves more. Since the 20th century, half of the bad marriages in New York have been blamed on Hera for putting up with you so much, father. Knowing that both of you let each other go will help women realize that men can't be trusted, Artemis said. Goddess of hunting, virginity, and the moon. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon. Very similar to Hera, she had long, dark brown hair, super straight and in a simple, super long braid that hung forward, reaching her thin, curved, pear-shaped waist. Her attire was like most Greek gods, a white tunic over her short skirt, but with a blouse with sleeves down her forearms, along with brown fingerless gloves and several leaves in her hair adorning her beautiful face. Zeus glared angrily at his eldest daughter between her twins and frowned. But before he could start an argument over her disrespect for him and for not taking his side, he said, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. But Hades, tired, spoke again. Zeus, the main topic, he said, growling with a certain anger. Continue your discussion later. Now we need to know what was the urgent matter you wanted to discuss, he said, and several people nodded. Zeus sighed angrily. Leaving the conversation for later would either make Hera more convinced of her decision or make her regret it. And he really didn't want it to be the first. First of all, I need one question, he said, stopping. Hades then began to slam the door in anger. Is he really not your son? Hera shook her head without looking at him and Zeus nodded, but that, even if only a little, annoyed Poseidon. If the son wasn't Hera's, he had to be Amphitrite. Although it was true that Zeus never felt her in the sky and Apollo did not see her with his dominion, there were times when she lowered the sea and that worried him. Zeus stopped talking to Hera and continued. Well, I called you here because I've lost my power. he said, confessing as the others looked at him in surprise and doubt. This was a delicate subject. Someone stole my Master Bolt, and without it, I can't wield my power, he said seriously. But the others just sighed. It was just a Master Bolt, that although dangerous was nothing compared to Zeus losing his power. Since that power is what keeps the sky and storms in a cycle of peace, if Zeus loses his power the sky will fall and storms will attack, and that would not be pretty for Greece and all of Olympus. After all, not everyone can lift the sky like Atlas did, and if Zeus lost his power, Atlas could escape and let the sky he had held up for years fall. Zeus, I'll be blunt. I suspect some of you stole my Master Bolt, and I want it back. If you do it now, your punishment will be temporary, not eternal, he said angrily, his eyes glowing electric gold. Automatically, everyone in the room frowned at the invalid accusation. Especially Hera, because her previous anger didn't help her tolerance for Zeus, and Hades was angry at her calling him to blame him. That was it! Calling us to blame us for your idiocy in losing his weapon! Poseidon accused, looking at Zeus angrily. And he returned her gaze even more angrily. What did you say? He asked with a frown. I didn't lose my lightning bolt, someone stole it, and I know it was one of you, he said with a frown. Hades, last I checked, no one from my kingdom has been up here in days. And I myself haven't been back since the meeting 1,000 years ago, said the king of the underworld with a frown and his arms crossed. Zeus, I'm not so sure about that, brother. Isn't it summer today? I asked, looking seriously at Hades. He clearly understood the accusation and frowned. You say that again and I'll kill you, Zeus, he growled in response as Zeus approached. Zeus, are you threatening me, brother? Hades, take it as you wish, moron, he responded with a face of clear hatred. The things Zeus did to him and his wife were unforgivable, and the accusation alone was what made the god of the dead explode. Poseidon, trying to calm things down, decided to speak up. Zeus, Persephone hasn't entered the Olympian Games in months. She always spends time with her mother in her fields, he said, and further away, Demeter herself decided to support him, even if the goddess didn't like it. Zeus looked at his brother leaving Hades and frowned. So it was you, my lightning bolt disappearing just hours after I claimed your demigod's son. Poseidon rolled his eyes. That argument lacks any logic. Percy could never climb the Olympian if he didn't even know the way, and anyone would sense him entering, he said, arms crossed. With nothing else to do, Zeus thought, until something came to his mind. So it was that brat, he said, and everyone looked at him, knowing who he was referring to. Demeter, seriously, Zeus? The boy is barely alive and only arrived in New York yesterday. He doesn't have any time to be here, so come up with something solid and not nonsense, said the goddess of crops, plants, and nature. I didn't know the boy, but that accusation was more stupid than Poseidon and his bastard son. Demeter, like all the goddesses of Olympus, was a beautiful woman with a perfect body, a normal-sized bust, and a plump rear end. Her hair was crimson, like her sister's, tied in a Chinese bun with a golden braid. Her clothing was a green dress with a high neck and long yellow sleeves. Zeus, I don't care, the girl demonstrated superpowered abilities. She could clearly have come up here and stolen the Master Bolt. Everyone was going to rebuke the god again for accusing others instead of accepting that he lost his lightning bolt, but someone decided to speak up. I hate to admit it, but father is right about that. A man with long, straight hair spoke up. And before you yell at me, your powers are enough to get you here, even without the elevator, and you could immobilize some minor gods without a problem, said the man who was none other than Apollo, god of the sun, music, healing, illness, prophecy, poetry, archery, philosophy, and much more. Apollo, quite contrary to his legends and mythology, was a pink-haired man, not blonde as described in various tales and poems. His hair, besides being pink like a flamingo, was straight and long, reaching down to his upper back. He had a golden hair clip in his left ear, along with his blue eyes. Hermes, that's true, but we'd still sense his impure blood entering Olympus. So he shouldn't be able to do it, said Hermes, god of speed and messenger of the gods. Hermes was a man with short black hair. His clothes were a gallant black suit along with white maroon ones like a good butler, while a crimson mark lay above his left eye which were crimson. His face was very calm along with his calm smile. Well, I can speak for everyone. When the boy disappeared from the blow struck by Zeus's champion, his presence simply vanished. It was as if he were just a walking void, with nothing to feel. Ares said this time, arms crossed. And although many looked at him strangely at his very intelligent way of speaking, the Greek god in Metal Gear continued speaking. Though that doesn't mean much, mother. When you contacted the boy, since I doubt you simply claimed him, at least he did today, said the god of war, and flames of war with his eyes, which were two small flames, looking at Hera. The woman frowned at her son's question. 2 days ago, Amphitrite recommended him to me to do some favors for me. But he needed to be my champion, so I left him at camp for a few days, she said with her arms crossed. Zeus frowned upon hearing what his wife did. Did you encounter a mortal with your true identity? Isn't that forbidden, father? Ares asked doubtfully as he played with his vulture on his left shoulder. Hera frowned at her son, who apparently only wanted to cause trouble, and although that was normal, the aggressive god of war never did it so intelligently. Don't act like an Ares, spending your days battling with your demigod children. Everyone knows it, especially those 2 children with the same wife. What do you call it? Your daughter is a prodigy, and you are the biggest disappointment, said Athena, the goddess of wisdom and learning. Chapter 8. Athena was a brown-haired woman like her half-sister Artemis. Although she strategically cut her hair, she had 2 strands on each side of her face. Although not very visible, she had a small scar under her left eye, which didn't detract from her beauty. Her attire consisted of a super-long cream-colored dress with a belt around her curvaceous, goddess-like waist, long brown gloves with brown belts draped over her arms, and a war cape draped over her shoulders, held in place by a golden medallion. A tiara adorned her pretty but cold face. Ares looked at his sister and frowned. Azula and Zuko have nothing to do with this, Athena. Besides, they're my children, unlike the boy who was strangely hired to perform some favors the same day the lightning bolt disappeared. And precisely their presence is chaos, escaping even the senses of Apollo, the person who sees everything for the day, he said with a smile. Besides, the boy actually became your champion today, when we were having a meeting. That's supposed to be for attention, isn't it, mother? He asked with a smile as he lowered his glasses slightly, his blazing eyes looking at Hera, who frowned at him in response. Zeus, who had begun to think, frowned because everything made sense. He looked at his wife, who would later become his ex-wife. You hired him to steal my master bolt, he said. Hera snarled. Can't you really shut the buck up and think first? Hera said, annoyed. All her brother was doing was damaging their already shattered relationship. Zeus, did you answer that to steal my lightning bolt, Master Hera? He asked angrily. Hera, I didn't do it, Zeus, you lost your bucking lightning bolt, she said angrily. Zeus was about to speak again, but the goddess interrupted him. Don't speak to me, Zeus. And I don't care about your stupid lightning bolt, for all I care it can be in father's hands and I wouldn't care. She shouted angrily to get up and walk towards the exit. Don't talk to him for now, he said to leave. But before he could finish leaving, Zeus spoke. The boy will have until the summer solstice to return my master bolt. If that day no bolt isn't in my hands, I'll make sure the boy doesn't see another day. The same goes for your son, Poseidon. With that, Zeus disappeared with a flash of lightning. Hera, who was still standing in the doorway with her back to the other gods, simply vanished in a pink but divine glow, and everyone else fell silent. Was that interesting? Apollo asked with a smile. Artemis looked at her brother, her disinterested gaze never leaving Penisco's ear. You shouldn't have brought me into that, brother. Father and Hera have their own affairs, and we shouldn't interfere. Hades, seeing that everything was over, decided to leave and return to his kingdom. And disappearing into a vortex of darkness, the other gods remained the same. Until Ares, with a victorious smile, engulfed them in flames. Elsewhere. Naruto could be seen next to Korra standing in the center of the camp while Annabeth and Katara were healing or checking that neither of the black-haired women were hurt. Which either of them were, apparently unharmed, or their damage simply disappeared for some reason. Naruto knew why, but Korra didn't. "That was fun," Naruto said, looking at Korra, who smiled similarly to him. "Right? We need to repeat that battle," she said, smiling, but a pinch from her niece made her snort. "Really, Katara?" I asked, looking at the young woman who pouted. "When I think about fighting after a fight, you get mad at me, so it's only fair that I do the same," she said, and Naruto laughed for the girl. Naruto looked at the girl who understood him. "Hello, strange blonde," he said, smiling at the blonde who was still looking at him, a little surprised to see no injuries on the boy who had just had a fierce battle. "My name is Naruto. Annabeth Chase, daughter of Artemis, goddess of strategic warfare and wisdom," she said, finishing treating Naruto's non-existent wounds. "How strange you're healthy. I swear I saw some burns on your forearms during your battle." Naruto smiled. Yeah? I heal pretty well. Mom says it's natural for me." He smiled as he stood up, stretching his arms out. Naruto looked at his jacket. "It's pretty damaged. Can you get me another one, Korra?" The camp leader, who had also been dumped by her niece, looked at him. "I think so. But I'll have to talk to Mr. D. He's on Olympus and rarely here. So I'll see if Chiron can get them for me." The girl didn't finish when a statue emerged from the ground, and that statue transformed into someone that Korra recognized, as did most of the campers around. Quickly, the statue came to life and ended up in flesh and blood, revealing the famous Mr. D. Better known as the god Dionysus, god of wine, theater, agriculture, and even parties. Dionysus, unlike half of Olympus, was very similar to how he was placed in his mythology. His appearance was that of an older man, possibly around 50 years old, with a very noticeable but neatly trimmed beard, black hair, and a yellow patterned shirt. He held a can of Coca-Cola in his hand as punishment for not drinking liquor or anything containing alcohol, a punishment imposed by his father Zeus. Naruto looked at the man. His appearance was very normal, but his aura said divinity everywhere. Although strangely with complete divinity, it also felt very strange or artificial in a way. I didn't know how to say it, but I knew his signature or aura wasn't pure, or not in the conventional divine way. Because even though he felt like God, he wasn't the god of God. He was more of a god and a bit of a god, but completely God. Kind of like he used to be like the campers, but now he's not. "Korra, Mr. D. Who would have thought you'd show up right now?" Mr. D, or more comfortably Dionysus, looked at the dark-haired Hawaiian and calmly sipped his Coca-Cola, leaving a silence between the two young men and the god. "Zeus will kill you at the summer solstice," she said sharply, looking at Naruto, who raised an eyebrow. Korra, besides being surprised, was also scared. "Wait, what? Like Lord Zeus will kill Naruto here, if he hasn't done anything. Why the threat so suddenly?" Korra glared at the wine god, who had just sipped his Coca-Cola again. "Two reasons. He's Hera's champion, and since he and Hera aren't getting along, he blames him. And secondly, he's apparently suspected of stealing the Master Bolt that went missing 2 days ago," she said, looking at Naruto. "Boy, if it were worth anything, I'd tell you to find a place to hide, but since it's impossible to hide from Olympus, it's better to commit suicide and you won't get much punishment." "Korra, but Master, Naruto is new, he doesn't even know what the Master Bolt is, let alone went to Olympus to steal it. Lord Zeus must be mistaken," she said, drawing the attention of some of the surrounding campers. Annabeth, who was one of the interested parties, looked at everything with doubt. "I'm sorry, young Korra, but Zeus has already decided. If the boy and young Percy don't deliver the lightning bolt to Zeus by the summer solstice, they will both die." All the demigods around frowned at how unfair Zeus was doing to the two new ones. Nothing new, really. And possibly Poseidon will start a battle against Zeus for this, so it's best that they commit suicide, and that way Poseidon won't start a battle against Zeus that will last for centuries. Korra looked at Naruto with concern, but Naruto just had his hands behind his head as if he didn't really care. Though he was really wrapped up in his own thoughts. "If I let her kill me, Mom will find any way to wipe out the entire pantheon and its history, and that would be easier for her than thinking. Long story short, they're screwed. He thought internally, searching for a way to prevent the divine genocide his mother might inflict on the Greek pantheon. They may not know it, but his mother was truly bloodthirsty when it came to himself and his two older brothers. Naruto, coming back to his senses, saw Moana shaking him. Upon returning, he looked at the girl with doubt. "Is something wrong, Moana?" he asked, looking at the girl with doubt. Looking around, he saw everyone looking at him, waiting for something, perhaps an answer. Moana frowned upon hearing Naruto's response. "Are you kidding me? They're about to kill you, and you're just standing here thinking about God knows what." Naruto scratched his head in confusion. "I'm sorry, I was just wondering what to do. But I've made up my mind. I'll find that Master Thunder and bring it back," he said decisively, looking at Dionysus. "Hey, Elder D, how long until the summer solstice?" he asked doubtfully. Although many were angered by the demigod's name-calling, the intrigue of the moment made him leave it aside. And Mr. D himself also left it aside, just like them. "A week and a day at most, even though it's already a day, so it's just a week," the man said calmly, looking at the sky. "Since it was already 12:27 p.m., that's half a day." "Korra, Naruto, are you really thinking of going after Lord Zeus's Master Bolt? I mean, you don't even know where it is or where to start looking for it," she said, surprised and worried for her new friend. It was totally stupid to do what the demigod would do, and besides not knowing what the Master Bolt was, he didn't even know where it was. "Naruto, don't worry, Korra. Besides, I'm not going alone. That Percy Jackson guy has to come with me, or I'll say it was him so they can kill him," he said with a carefree smile. But instantly the black-haired man emerged from the crowd. Here I am, and it wasn't me," he said, raising his hands to prove his point. But Naruto placed his hand around the neck of the son of Poseidon, slightly unsettling the boy. Naruto gave a small chuckle and smiled. "Don't worry. I was joking, but you'll really have to come with me. I don't know much about Greek mythology, so I don't even know where to start looking." "Percy, sure," he said nervously. Although, before Percy could speak further, he was interrupted by someone. "I'm glad you're so eager to take his possible death between the two of you, and also that you're taking responsibility for the fact that a war could start because of you. But you can't leave like this, at least not Percy," Chiron said, appearing behind Dionysus, who withdrew, drinking from his Coca-Cola. Percy turned to look at Chiron and looked up. "Lord Chiron, I need your training to pass this test," he said, drawing a smile from the man for training another demigod he had hopes for, perhaps surpassing Heracles. "Naruto, hey Korra, do you know where I can learn to better control my earth powers? I mean, I know a lot about the element, even heating it to create lava, but I need to improve more," he said, looking at the girl. "Also a little fire." Korra thought for a moment. I can help you on land. But fire, I really can't. For that, you'll have to ask the children of Ares and Hephaestus," she said thoughtfully, remembering someone. "Azula is a good idea if you want." Naruto thought and nodded. Setting Jackson free, he smiled. "Well, let's learn." He smiled, excited by what he thought was a simple adventure, but a spectacular adventure that he'd have very soon. Turning around, I looked at Moana, who had a blank stare. "Hey, Moana, what do you think? We're going to go all over Greece looking for lightning, aren't we?" Moana shook her head at her carefree friend, and Nani smiled at her side. "Yes, Naruto, this is very, very amazing," the water goddess or spirit said calmly. "But remember what would happen if you don't achieve your goal. Your mother won't be happy if you die here." I whisper so no one else can hear them. Naruto just nodded. "Don't worry. I won't fail. I'll search everywhere, and if I don't find one, I'll create one." He shrugged. The only reason he couldn't create lightning right now was because it would simply ruin the adventure and excitement. Moana slapped her hand across her face. How can someone as old as humanity itself be as stupid as a modern-day child? Those were the girl's thoughts. She simply put that aside. The demigod was almost or worse than an infant, and she knew he'd see this as fun, while the other boy involved looked like he was going to pee his pants. Korra approached Naruto and understood something. The black-haired man looked at him doubtfully. "It's something for good luck, you'll need it," he said to the boys, smiling at them. Naruto, though, was confused. "Naruto, I'm not going anywhere yet, so you could leave it for when I leave." At that, Korra smiled warmly. "I never said it was for your mission. Tomorrow, you'll begin earthbending training with me, and if you want, you'll be training firebending with Azula. So I assure you, you'll need a little luck. The training won't be easy," she said mockingly as she left. Naruto looked at her and smiled. "Korra is so friendly, what do you think, Nanny?" he asked, smiling as he placed his hand around the air spirit's neck. "Of course, Naruto, of course." Chapter 9. It was already nighttime at the campsite where all the campers, as rarely happened during the day, were almost all around the campfire, calmly enjoying group chats and conversations, as well as anecdotes and stories for the younger ones. And the first was Korra, talking about the time she took out 50 minotaurs with just her airbending, which she literally used to create a tornado that swirled around the minotaurs so much that she unknowingly created fire, setting them ablaze. And that's how she discovered she could use fire even without having any divine ancestors like that, the girl said, smiling. Several of the young men were quite amazed by the anecdote about the strongest demigod among them. "And Miss Korra, did you ever use your grandfather's power? I mean Lord Zeus's?" he asked, and Korra nodded. "When I was young, I used it several times, although after growing up, I simply became so strong that using something so powerful wasn't necessary. But if you're asking about the first time I used it, it was when I was 15, when I faced a creature. Do you know its name?" I asked, and several shook their heads, excited to know who the demigoddess girl was referring to. "His name was Layden, a 100-headed dragon and caretaker of the Hesperides garden," she said, smiling proudly at her achievement. While the youngsters were amazed, none of them knew what that 100-headed dragon was, or who Harden was. But the mere fact that it had 100 heads already said it was amazing. "Korra, are you telling the same old story again?" Clarice asked as she approached the campfire. And Korra just smiled. "Hey, it's fun, and they're new, so it'll be fun for them. Besides, it's their last summer here this year. We won't see them again for another 3, almost 4 months," he said, looking at the young people who would return to their human lives in 10 days or less. "Fletcher, that's true. Besides, you don't always survive a creature that even Heracles couldn't defeat. I'm surprised you and Luke lived to see another day after that. I honestly expected your corpses at the door," he said, receiving a punch on the shoulder. It came from Annabeth, who was frowning slightly. "How could you say that, idiot? There are children here." Lee Fletcher smiled sheepishly. "I'm sorry. But hey, death is like the wind. Something that dash." Korra, who always accompanies me and whispers her yearning for me in the air. "Yes, Fletcher, we already know your catchphrase, which you read on some cereal," Korra mocked, looking at the blonde, who looked slightly offended. "Hey! I didn't read that on cereal, it was on Instagram. The quotes there are really stylish, especially the dark ones," he said, recalling the social network he used to spend hours on during his time away from camp. "Go on. We know you like social media. You shouldn't always say it, hacker boy," a voice shouted, making Korra and several others sigh. 3 young women approached the campfire, one of them a blue one. The other was a girl with dark brown hair tied in a long braid ending with a red bow. Her clothes were just like anyone would imagine a Japanese girl would wear, due to her training, which helped her develop what they call karuiken, or light fist. This was Tai Li, daughter of the messenger and traveler god Hermes. On Azula's right was a girl with her hair in 2 Japanese buns, still leaving 2 very long strands free that fell over her shoulders and could be seen in the front. Her yellow eyes were cold and calm, along with her expressionless face. And finally, her attire, like her companions, was Japanese clothing, a dark crimson shade with a black hue left by the edges of her white nightgown. "This is my daughter of the blacksmith god Hephaestus." "Azula, oh, apparently I'm not very welcome here, huh? Why is that, hitting your little cousin?" she asked Cora as she sat quietly with the others at the campfire, even though the niches were quiet. The veterans were not the same. Because Azula didn't like anyone, which didn't matter at all to the prodigal girl, and how she was born and raised. It doesn't surprise her at all that the girl is so proud, because it's not for nothing, although it hasn't been confirmed yet. The girl meets and fights alongside her divine father, Ares. God of fire, fiery war, flames of battle and violent war. Cora looked at the girl with a frown. Really, her presence alone was irritating. She knew that if Ares hadn't brought her here since she was 9, the girl would simply be abandoned by her mother for her way of being. Don't involve Katara in your stupidity. I don't even know why she's playing along, Cora said, annoyed, looking at the girl. Azula smirked at Cora. Possibly because she's jealous of me? She can't stand that I'm stronger and better than her. Cora frowned, but to ignore the girl, she calmed down. Whatever you say, Azula, whatever you say, she said, trying to let the matter rest. Fighting with Ares' prodigy daughter was a waste of time. Even if she wasn't as explosive as her father, she still held on to that zero pride in herself. Clarice, at least Zuko isn't like that, the girl whispered while eating her marshmallow, thinking about what her other half-brother would be like. Now what will our battle be like? She asked, looking at Annabeth, who was holding a chair and pen in her hand. Annabeth shrugged calmly. I couldn't tell you, with the new Naruto's level. It'll be hard to match up with the others if we only use cabins on each team, he said calmly as he sat down. While Azula smiled, remembering the power the boy demonstrated. Hey, this is incredible. With him here, I can finally participate, she said, smiling because this was fabulous to her. Because of her level, she either only participated without using her skills or didn't participate because of her skills. Annabeth thought about that and nodded. That's true, though I'll stay with him. He seems like a very easygoing guy. So he'll be able to take my orders without wanting to do something else or disobeying like someone else, she said, looking at Cora, which stuck out her tongue at him. Bored, I whisper angrily. Hey Cora! Speaking of that guy, where is he right now? Azula asked, interested. She earned Cora's gaze, who raised an eyebrow, not trusting the girl at all. She's with Percy and Grover. Apparently, several campers aren't too comfortable with Percy's presence, and the fact that he's a son of Poseidon, the girl said, understanding the others. A child of one of the big three was always a bad omen for the camp, both because of the increasing number of monsters in the world and the hostility of some of the other big three toward Percy and, consequently, toward anyone else near the boy. Clarice frowned at the name. That brat, she whispered, annoyed at the memory of the brat she's desperate to beat up. Just you wait, seaweed boy, I'll smash your head in, she thought, annoyed. Cora, are you still upset? He only responded to your attack, Clarice. You tried to shove his head into the bath. Him attacking you with that same water seems fair to me, she said calmly while eating her marshmallows, which she had almost let burn from talking. Clarice, ignoring Cora's words, stood up and moved with her spear. I really don't know how father still considers you, Clarice. Aggressive but out of control. You know how to fight, but you lack harmony with your allies. How is it possible that you are still considered on his list of best children? When Azula said that, Clarice stopped, and the other veterans at the campfire were alert. Not just for an attack or a fight, but to protect the younger ones, who seemed very interested in the converse, unaware that the conversation wasn't exactly friendly. Clarice, what do you mean by that, Azula? She asked, squeezing the spear in her hand, which sparked with crimson electricity, which came from her inherited power as a daughter of Ares. Unconcerned by her anger, Azula spoke. What? With your progress, I might lose my status as a father. Being defeated by a demigod who didn't even know he was a demigod until 12 hours earlier, do you think Dad will take this well? He spoke mockingly as Clarice grew even angrier and was about to explode. You'll probably accompany that fool Zuzu in search of recovering the honor you made father lose. Clarice was about to attack with her spear completely covered in electricity, but before she could even lift the spear from her hand, Ty Lee struck Clarice in several parts of her body, knocking the daughter of Ares to the ground. Falling to her knees, Clarice frowned as she felt her divine power extinguished and unable to use her body properly. That damn woman! She thought, annoyed, looking at Ty Lee. Ty Lee smiled kindly at Clarice, who, like a rabid animal, growled at the Hermes girl and the best hand-to-hand fighter in the camp. I'm sorry, but hey, I'm saving you too, she said, smiling and looking away from Mai. Upon hearing that and noticing Ty Lee's gaze on her, she put her blades back in her sleeves. Fine, you can leave her now. We'll go find that new guy. I need to know more about him, Azula said as she uncrossed her legs, worrying some people about the girl being with Naruto. Even though he was a seemingly strong and cunning boy, he was very innocent, due to his lack of experience with people other than the two girls around him. He would easily believe that the girl wanted to be his friend instead of making him her fighting slave through manipulation. Ty Lee punched Clarice's shoulder, causing her to regain feeling in her body. When she was about to do something, Cora pinned her feet to the ground. Clarice, this is no time for nonsense. He said it would be the girl. Clarice snorted in annoyance, and using the electricity surrounding her spear, she freed herself from the rocks at her feet. The children of Ares really are a problem, Annabeth whispered. Fletcher sweated profusely to agree with Annabeth. Every child of Ares at this camp has been a pain in the ass more than once, and obviously the top dog goes to Clarice for her easily broken pride and Azula for her arrogance and mockery. Cora, should we let her get close to Naruto? She could easily be manipulating him to join her, said the girl, worried. If Naruto lets Azula get the better of him, they would easily have the biggest pain in the ass in the camp and worse, with Azula by his side. Annabeth, tomorrow she'll be on my side of the flag game, so I'll be sure to tell her Azula isn't a nice person, she said as she got up and headed to her cabin. It was time to go to sleep or read a book while she got sleepy. Elsewhere, Naruto, Grover and Percy Jackson could be seen on a rock at the edge of the camp on a rock looking at the stars. The three were here because Naruto noticed that the boy Percy had no friends, or well, nobody wanted to be his friend because of the son of Poseidon and the consequences that brought. Even the blonde daughter of Athena who helped him with everything at the camp was not his friend, only his guide as he got used to the camp, then she might distance herself from it like the others. And Naruto could know how his situation feels, just being Hera's champion already gave him a bad reputation. Although he didn't really have any friends beyond Moana and Nani, the ones he met a little bit, like Fletcher, Cora, or Katara, didn't seem too keen on being with him. Or maybe he just didn't have time to talk to them. He thought with a drop of sweat. I spoke with Cora and Katara a few hours ago, he thought, recalling their conversation while Annabeth treated his non-existent wounds. Grover, hey Lord Naruto, how does it feel to be the champion of two goddesses like Hera and Amphitrite? Asked the satyr while Naruto shrugged. Naruto looked at the satyr, calling him Lord, a rather boring thought, considering all the unnecessary formalities. It doesn't feel special, I just have a more comfortable bed in Hera's cabin, he said, looking at a cabin. Or rather, the cabin that looked the best at this time of night. Chiron quickly turned Naruto's head toward the cabin. Don't look at Artemis's cabin. They say that a man who does so is turned into a bear, or worse, a deer, he said, terrified. Naruto removed the satyr's hands from his cheeks and sweat dropped at what he considered an exaggeration from the goddess of the hunt and women. You really exaggerate, Chiron. It's not like she's that bad. Percy, well, she turned her friend into a bear while she was pregnant because she slept with her brother in her temple, he said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow because although he saw it as cruel, it wasn't exactly entirely bad, although he didn't like the fact that she was pregnant. It's a betrayal, it's justified. Percy, and her friend really was raped, he said, leaving Naruto blank. He transformed his friend into a bear, then married her and killed her along with the possible baby that was born that had nothing to do with it just because she was raped. Percy, besides, the house lasted over 29 years and it was equally a bear for her and her daughter, said Perseus as they remembered that class. Now he remembered why Professor Chiron gave so much importance to not messing with Artemis or Athena. Naruto, even so, I'd like to know why he did it, he said, and both Percy and Grover looked at him like he was crazy, totally crazy. I don't like playing someone by legends. They tend to be changed or misinterpreted over time, or because they are said by someone who hates you. Believe me, I know how it is. I spoke while smiling and looking at the stars. And as he looked around the sky, he found something strange. Either the moon was staring at him, or his mind was out of whack. Perhaps the latter, he thought, once again putting aside the moon above him. Percy, well, that's true, but she's still the woman who hates men the most. Clearly, you can't ask her without her killing you instantly, or worse, hunting you down like a deer. Naruto smiled because he knew it was true. Well, does that really matter? I've been told that dreaming costs nothing. So thinking about having an encounter with someone divine and learning more about them isn't a sin. Grover, well, don't lie, I don't know, one night, he said nervously. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. One night? What does one night have to do with dreaming about a goddess? He asked with a straight face, his inexperienced and very innocent mind not understanding what the satyr had said. And as expected, Percy's mouth fell open. I wish I had his innocence, thought the son of Poseidon, looking amazed at Naruto. Besides being very cheerful, optimistic, and strong, he was innocent and way too kind in every way. Apparently living on an island isn't so bad. Just knowing that he is capable of giving second chances to people like Artemis is surprising. Anyone who didn't fear the gods as Naruto didn't seem to would call Artemis stupid or unfortunate, as he knew many thought. Grover, Naruto, you got the talk. Percy and Naruto looked at the satyr as if he were a fool, but clearly for different reasons, since Percy did it because for him. With what Naruto recently said, he clearly doesn't know about Hex, or so he thought, and Naruto looked at him because the question was stupid anyway. Grover, you know there are a lot of talks? And I've talked about different topics, so could you be more specific? Percy, no, better leave it like that, said the son of Poseidon with a blank face. He possesses powerful weapons, he is powerful on his own and apparently has elements like fire and earth. He is capable of not only facing Korra but knocking her down and practically beating her, and from what he was told, Korra could be the next Hercules because of her magnificent powers, even being sent to look for one of the apples that Hercules was sent to look for, and unlike Hercules, she was able to emerge unharmed without seeking help from a titan. Oh, here you are, kid! I've been looking for you for a while, said a voice Naruto instantly recognized. And along with the others, he turned to look at Azula and Mai, who had left Ty Lee behind for some reason that didn't even matter. Azula? What are you doing here? The satyr asked, earning the gaze of the daughter of Ares on top of his being. Azula, Grover, don't you have any grass to eat? She asked mockingly, scaring Grover, who moved a little behind Percy. He was frowning at his friend's mockery. Hey, you didn't treat Grover like that. He's not just some animal you can just dismiss. Azula, son of Poseidon, you should stay out of it. Your resistance to high temperatures won't save you from the flames of war, I assure you. I've already tested it with other children of the sea, she said, lighting a blue-flamed calculator in her palm. Naruto, seeing this, got a little nervous. Hey, there's no need to fight. We can all be friends here, we just have to understand. Wait, am I seeing this correctly? He said, stopping trying to calm the children of Ares and Poseidon and looking into the distance, where in a lagoon the beautiful moon was reflected, leaving the water clearer than it was. And although it was beautiful, what caught my attention wasn't the moon's reflection, but rather the shadow that seemed to dance or something similar on top of a rock. Chapter 10. Follow. Percy, what are you looking at, Naru? The boy was cut off as he looked at the lagoon. Wow, that's beautiful, he whispered, watching the lagoon dance, where the crystal clear water, the reflection of the moon, the darkness, and the dancing created a beautiful scene. It wasn't really visible, but from the size and shape, it was clearly a girl, although its size suggested it was a younger boy of 15 to 16, and she was apparently practicing some postures or dance. Mia and Azula raised an eyebrow. So, that bit about a nature spirit dancing around here was real. I thought it was just a bunch of virgin campers' hallucinations, she said, smiling at the dance, which, though fluid, was rustic like thick, firm stone. Percy was left speechless by her thinking that everything men think about has to do with hex or hot women. But come to think of it, she's super hot. At that moment, he cut himself, feeling a knife emanating from a very hot area on his jugular, and looking down at a blue girl with a less than friendly smile, he said, "If you're going to fantasize about me, at least look in a blind spot." Percy gulped and nodded. "I'd rather look at a daughter of Aphrodite than at her, she's scary," Jackson thought, frightened. Naruto watched this in amazement. It was like a stone moving like water, something amazing, and something he wanted to do. Starting to walk toward the edge of the gigantic rock, he prepared to jump toward the young woman. But after taking the last step, the figure turned to look back at his place. Everyone was surprised, and Azula became interested in the sight. "Did she just look at us?" the son of Poseidon asked nervously, a little scared. The figure of the nymph had just stared at them as fixedly as if her gaze had been on them all along. "Grover, I doubt it. Well, she only looked at us when Naruto got within that exact distance." "I mean, couldn't she sense him with a 2-kilometer limit?" asked the satyr, and Naruto looked at him with some thoughts. "Naruto, couldn't it be sensory? Something like through the wind, the heat, or the humidity in the air?" he asked, watching as the figure now turned around, staring at them very quietly. Clearly, it was expecting something. "Azula, I saw you passing by right there, it's clearly land," she said as she summoned a blast of blue fire ready to kill the possible nymph who kept looking at them. And before he could do anything, Naruto felt the ground rumble and had to move to the side as a spike of earth shot out, about to impale him. But the stake stopped just inches from touching him, something that surprised him because he really thought he'd be impaled. Naruto looked down in surprise as the silhouette seemed to be searching for them. "It seems its ground tracking range extends to this point, but why can't it see us now?" Naruto asked, confused, noting that only when it crossed the range was the nymph able to stare at his position. "Azula, their eyes probably don't see as far as a demigod's. Being a spirit doesn't mean they're better than humans in physical abilities," the girl said, smiling. He thought about killing the nymph, or spirit of what looked like the earth, but decided to let it go. It had nothing important to it, and Fat D would make a big deal out of it. "Okay, we're leaving. And find Ty Lee. I don't know how he got lost this way. We'll only be here for a few minutes," she said, thinking about her last thoughts before leaving. "Although Naruto, right?" Naruto looked at the girl and nodded at her name. "I'd like to talk to you tomorrow, the two of us. I hope you'll be useful in battle," he said, smiling, planning to take Naruto into his group and on his side. With him, being the new camp leader and making her father prouder would be easier. Meanwhile, Naruto, who was confused by the demigoddess's words, said, "Of course," and turned back to look where the possible nymph who had disappeared was. "She escaped, and I wanted to meet her," he whispered, his hands crossed like a child. "Percy, Naruto, how did you want to meet her? I was going to kill you," the boy shouted, shaking the black-haired boy, who went blank at the son of Poseidon's exaggeration. It's not much to make a big deal about, since Moana tried to kill him the same way when she arrived on his island after a storm. "Naruto, fine, I'm sorry," he said, sweating a drop, although something caught his attention. "Hey Percy, Grover. Don't you notice anything strange on the moon?" asked the boy, drawing the attention of the other two. "Percy, I doubt it, nor that the moon is anyone. Grover, the moon is Artemis's chariot, which she drives at night. It's said she can see all sides of the moon. So it's not unusual for her to look at you," said the satyr calmly. Although he himself could tell that there was something strange about the moon, he attributed it to the fact that it was the first time he had ever wondered if the moon was staring at him. Naruto, who listened calmly to the explanation, nodded a little interested. "It's a slight, very limited omniscience, or rather, a very limited cosmic consciousness that no longer only looks out for where it is on Earth. Well, I think it's time to go back," Percy said as he stood up to stretch, while starting to walk towards the camp where Azula and Mai had left a few minutes ago. And Grover, seeing his friends retreat, did the same. "See you later, guys." Naruto said goodbye to the boys, who responded with an "all the same," which made him smile. "Okay, let's choose a room. Which one will be better, Hera's or Amphitrites? He thought, placing his hands behind his head, while his eyes, through slits, gazed at the moon. He didn't like being watched without his notice, but he let it go. Nor that the girl was planning to kill him or anything like that, or so they hoped. A goddess who hates men, that's odd, he thought, looking toward Artemis's cabin, which was giving off a strong lunar glow. Okay, let's leave all this. Go to sleep. I have to eat tomorrow until my mind remembers something else to do, he said, hands clasped behind his back, as he headed toward Hera's cabin, seeing that there were only 12 of them. Clearly, there wouldn't be any more cabins besides the 12 Olympians. The next day. It was already morning, where all the campers were divided into two groups, where on one side were several from the house of Demeter, Aphrodite, Ares, Dionysus and Hephaestus, and on the other were those from the house of Athena, Poseidon, Apollo and Hermes respectively. Already in the center, talking among themselves, Naruto and Korra tied up. They were both in the center for two simple reasons. The first was that their cabins, having only one inhabitant, weren't considered for this battle, or so it was before Korra and Naruto arrived. But now that Naruto was here, the two strongest could be divided between both teams. The second reason was because it seemed like it wasn't yet clear who would go each way, from what they heard from both sides. Apparently, both the leader of the blue team, Annabeth, and the leader of the red team, Azula, wanted the dark-haired Hawaiian. Naruto and Korra, I heard somewhere that this event is held every Friday. Tell me, is it fun? He asked doubtfully while looking at the clear sky. Korra, who was leaning against a tree next to the Hawaiian, shrugged. The last time I participated in this was when I was 13. Back then I could fight the campers while using a single element. Now any element is so refined that my power destabilizes the team I'm on, giving them too much of an advantage. She said. They frowned. They even took her out of the fights against the hunters of Artemis because she alone dominated and, although no one says so, humiliated all the hunters with only her weakest element, which was the earth. That. Naruto, if it took so long, why don't you seem excited to fight today? Korra, well, let's just say everyone prefers you isn't helping matters, she said, grumbling because now that she could participate no one seemed interested in her. Whereas before everyone looked for ways to get her on their team without cheating, like simple things like disguising her with armor or even making her fight without powers, although even Ace always won and they discovered her. Naruto, to make it more fun, how about we both take our flags and have a battle at the lake again? The loser takes the other's flag and wins. As the two conversed, Annabeth approached the camp's overpowered duo with a smile. It's decided, Naruto. You'll go with me, and Azula will take Korra, the blonde said, taking Naruto's hand to pull him away. Still in a hurry, the Hawaiian said goodbye. See you later, Korra. I hope to meet you face to face and fight again, he said as he said goodbye. Korra snorted in annoyance because the fight for the Uzumaki apparently only ended when Azula surrendered. Because everyone wants him, I have more skills and could be more useful, she whispered, walking toward the red team, where the Azula leader was waiting with a frown. With Naruto. Naruto could be seen arriving at the blue side, where Naruto could see Percy, Katara, Lee Fletcher, and from what little he noticed there was also the girl named Ty Lee. Hey Annabeth, what will we do? He said with interest as the others looked at him. They were on the left side of the river where a blue flag fluttered in the day's breeze. We're going to have a little fight against the red team. The rules are simple. Fight not to the death. Take the opponent's flag and then take it to your enemy. Naruto nodded excitedly. I'll fight Korra, he said, excited for a possible second fight against the girl. She seemed the most capable of fighting him in a proper warm-up, so this should be exciting. Although all that desire to fight vanished when Annabeth denied his request. We'll make a plan to beat them. We can't just go into battle brusquely. That's the way of the children of Ares. And it's the style that has been beating us more than 15 times in a row. Annabeth heard her friend Lee Fletcher whisper with a frown. Have you lost that much? The other side really beat you up, she said, laughing slightly at what her mind imagined from the previous fights. Although it wasn't funny to Annabeth, she frowned in annoyance. That's only 7 times in a row. We broke that streak a long time ago. she said, huffing in annoyance. Although, as before, someone spoke up. The same streak that was restarted because we only won by infiltrating Korra? Tylee said mockingly, because he personally barely participated in this. He was just neutral, but he still liked to make fun of everything he could. Naruto looked at the girl who mocked Annabeth and approached. Are you Tylee? He asked, looking confused at the girl who nodded with the same doubt. Cool, Fletcher told me about you and that you're the best fighter here. Do you want to have a fight? Around him, everyone went blank. He looks like the son of Ares. All he thinks about is fighting, Fletcher said to Annabeth, who nodded. If that was true, she was lucky he didn't complain, or it would be a worse beating for her team. Tylee, do you want that, handsome? Or don't you want a date with me? She said, approaching the boy to touch his abdomen, which confused the Hawaiian and angered Annabeth. Leave that stuff alone. Right now it would be better to be preparing for battle, she said, frowning. Letting Naruto interact with any of Azula's team shouldn't happen. Naruto, under Azula's command, would simply be the Hades of the camp. Tylee clicked her teeth in annoyance. She hoped to at least make the new guy or the son of Poseidon blush, but apparently the daughter of Athena didn't want her interacting with Naruto. Call me handsome, he said with a smile, stopping with a strong jump and a high acrobatic performance. He ended up entering the forest that blocked the view of the river and directed them to the enemy camp and base. Hey Annabeth, what's a date? He asked doubtfully. Meanwhile, the girl, who had been in shock, stared at the new guy in amazement. Why you don't know what a date is? She asked, earning the boy a denial. How the hell does a young man today not know what a date is? It's like saying he didn't know about relationships, or even worse, how children are born. Opening her eyes, the girl cautiously looked at her greatest potential competitor. Naruto, do you know how babies are made? Of course I know how babies are made. I'm not that stupid either, he said, crossing his arms at the insult to his intelligence. It's when Mom and Dad walk into the room, Mom climbs on top of Dad, and they start dash. Annabeth, yeah, we get it, she said, covering the Hawaiian man's mouth. But you know how to make a baby, but you don't know what a date is, and it's even more basic how to have a girlfriend, she whispered, blushing at what the boy was about to say. Naruto removed his hands from his mouth and looked at her more doubtfully. What's a girlfriend? Does she eat? Now, not just Annabeth, but all the campers on his team looked at him like he was an idiot. Naruto, where have you lived? Fletcher asked doubtfully because someone as innocent but at the same time stupid as Naruto shouldn't exist. Even the young ones knew things like that. I lived my first 3 years with Nanny, in the Hawaiian cemetery. And then my 103rd year, I lived with my brothers on the 4th island of Hawaii, when it was still my own. And my remaining millions of eons, I lived alone on my various islands that were stolen from me, he said calmly while everyone around him stood with their mouths open. Are you millions of years old? Katara asked, amazed by the age of the demigod, whom she thought was a teenager like her Aunt Korra or the same age as Annabeth and others. Naruto nodded. Yeah, didn't you know? I'm a demigod with eternal life. Mom says I was born that way because I'm special, he said, remembering his mother and her theme of immortality. Although it seemed strange to him that he was born after the first intelligent humans, since it really was rare for a god to intertwine with those primitive humans, but tastes were tastes. Annabeth, if he's really that old, that would mean he's older than most of the gods. No, all of the gods on Olympus today. If that's true, why is he even here, let alone who his mother is, that he keeps mentioning?
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.